Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody to our October board meeting. Thank you for all those who came out tonight, as well as my fellow directors. Thank you all for being here and being here for our community. Want to get started as usual. We have a very full agenda. I would love to come here one day and say, you know, we have a really light agenda, but so far have not been able to say that. So we're going to just go ahead and get started. I did want to make just two comments about two different events that happened over the last week. The first is I want to thank all the Restonians and others that came out for the Monday night PRC meeting that was hosted by the county. I think it showed the resolve of Restonians. I think we had about 900 people in that cafeteria, plus many more that were in the overflow rooms, and I'm sure many, many more that were watching it on TV. And I just think it speaks to when Restonians want and need something, we're willing to stand up and take the time. And I also want to thank our other organizations that helped push that, which is Reston Citizen Association, Reston 2020, and Reclaim Reston as well. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to educate the community and for coming out and showing the county that it means a lot to us on what happens to Reston. The other thing I want to do is I want to take a minute just to thank the staff for, one, the idea, and two, for executing a wonderful event that we had for new people to Reston. This was last Saturday or Saturday. We had the first ever Reston Newcomers Bus Tour, and we had about 40-ish people, all new to Reston within the last several months. Some were actually still renovating their home and hadn't even moved in yet. But we met over at the lake house. We got them on some buses. We toured them all over Reston, so they really got to see, and it was a beautiful, beautiful day, which also helped. Got to see some of the beauty of Reston and some of our facilities, and got to know each other because they are new to Reston, and some of them were living in the same communities and clusters, and that was kind of a cool thing to see. And they met back at the lake house where Kathy Hutchins actually joined us, as well as Ken Plum, to welcome these new Restonians to our beautiful community. So again, it was a first ever event. I'm sure we'll do many, many more because it was deemed a huge success. So thank you to staff for the idea and then for the execution of that. So those are my major opening comments. So we are ready to jump into our agenda, but first we need to approve it. So can I get a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda. A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. It's unanimous. Kate. So now we're moving on to our consent calendar. I'm sure all of my fellow directors have read over all this great material. I do want to just highlight, just real quickly, the work of our Environmental Advisory Committee on this consent calendar and the Razor report that they did. That was that group is doing amazing work for Reston, and again, all volunteer work, so thank you to them. So if I could get a motion or on the consent calendar.
So move. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Unanimous, Kate. All right. So we are already on item D, so we're turning this over to Kate. And Kate, like everybody else, I say, remember, we're on a time limit.
Yes, ma'am.
No special treatment.
Bear with me a second as I pull up the presentation. I'm going to go up to the podium to present tonight.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you can go home. I sympathize, though. Our vice president is bleeding right now because he cut himself while he was eating a sandwich, so.
Hard crust.
No, there's no pausing. We don't pause, even for blood. No, we just keep on trucking.
Just a flesh wound.
Just a
Just
flush.
put a napkin on it and let's call it, keep on going. Thanks, Kate. Sorry.
No problem. Sherry, thank you for giving me some extra time, a little bit of extra time. I know I need to stay on time this evening. Sherry specifically asked me to go over in a little bit more detail the report that was in the board packet. It's also available on the association's website. It is my third quarter report for the year. And this report really highlights highlights all of the different activities that not only myself, but the board, some of our committees, and as well as the rest of staff have been working on. The report is focused basically on the objectives that were given to me by this board in June of 2017. And all of the objectives that I have, they're performance objectives that are all aligned to the association's multi-year strategic plan. I'm not going to go in depth in everything that's up there, but I just wanted to highlight the different areas of focus that we have. Each objective that I'm going to talk about this evening, again, it's more detailed in the report, can be found on the association's website as well. So the very first objective that the board set was to take an inventory and evaluate all of the association's assets for inclusion on the 2018-19 capital projects budget. So that was something that they wanted to have done. They also wanted to make sure that the fiscal committee had an opportunity to review it this month, or I apologize, this year, in advance of the board approving the 2018-2019 budget. So the way we undertook that was looking at our 10-year capital look ahead of all of the different projects that we anticipated would be coming up to come up with a figure, reviewed that with the fiscal committee in July of this year, presented that information to the board on August the 7th. The board approved an appropriation amount on September the 18th at $2.9 million. This evening, we're almost, as you can see, I've noted that we are underway on that objective. This evening, we'll be receiving a little bit more information because we've gotten new information about another project that we do have to include in our projects list that also impacts the 10-year capital look ahead. So this evening, the board will be considering a different appropriation amount of $2.99 million this evening. So hopefully after this evening, that will go green and it will be a completed objective. The second objective there is to inventory all other fixed assets in the corporation for assessment management software or mechanism that we can track all of our assets. I wanted to deviate a little bit from what is in the report to give a different perspective of the importance of this objective that the board has set. The association has 67 different recreational areas or parks. Within those parks are multiple different assets. The picture that's up on the screen there is of Hook Road. I used Hook Road because it's something that we are looking very closely at with the community group right now. But that park has several different types of assets there. When we talk about a tennis court complex as an example, and we're looking at the fixed assets of that court, it's not just the court surface, it's the fence around it, it's also the lighting. So it's very important that we get the laundry list of all of the association's assets correct. Also at Hook Road, you're going to find a multi-purpose court with a basketball hoop. You're going to find a seating area. You're going to find ball fields. All of our major recreation facility areas, the other 66 that we have, are similar with many different components. It's important that we get that list right. We will have that list completed by December so that the board can see all of the assets that we have and all of the different pieces and parts. But that will be utilized so that we can conduct our reserve study in 2019. And we'll be working closely with the fiscal committee when we're doing that reserve study for the association's assets. So that's the second objective that I was provided. The third was to develop recommendations on short-term and long-term opportunities to enhance and modify services and programs for the association that are based on use participation and revenue and benchmarking with other public and private entities. So this is marked as a completed activity. However, there's always room to continue to look at what we have and what we're doing, and staff are doing that on a regular basis. In May of this year, one of the things that our recreation staff came to the board with was kind of a snapshot of where they were in the 2017 budget with ideas for things that they were considering for the 2018 and 2019 budget. There's a little snapshot on that PowerPoint there of what we came to the board with things like pickleball, which the board will be taking up probably next month. Also, adult series offerings. We do a lot of programming for kids, but we don't do enough for adults. So one idea that is being considered in the upcoming budget cycle for the next 2 few years is possibly an adult camp. Just like we have camp for kids, maybe we're going to do a camp for adults. I think we all want to let our hair down sometimes and go and have fun. I know that when I drop my daughter off at camp, I wish that I could go boating with her that day, or go trampsing in the woods, or go for a swim, or try and chase a greased watermelon around, or toss
Massage
balloons.
is included in that? Sign me up today.
We can look at that, yes,
Okay.
absolutely, look at things like that. But also that was on that list that was presented to the board and considered by the board through the month of August, as well as on September 18th, were alternate, at December 18th, as well as September's board meeting last month, was an alternate pool schedule. We heard quite a bit from our membership at the importance of putting our pool schedule, as much of it as we could, back to the way it used to be. So those were considerations that were underway. So that is the objective 3 there. Objective 4 is to develop a plan for RA to play a more active role in engaging the community with public, county, and other stakeholders on development and redevelopment in Reston. You're going to hear a lot more about that this evening, but that's an important objective. We consider that completed because of the different activities that are underway right now. The first activity that was most important for the land use team that RA has, and that includes not only the board of directors, they're a very vital part of that team, but also our senior director of Parks, Recreation, Community Resources, Larry Butler, our land use planner, Kelsey Steffen, and our land use consultant, John McBride. Put together a 12 to 36 month laundry list of goals to accomplish over the next 3 years that looked at things like informing members of land use and transportation projects, something that is underway right now, important to us, although it's complete, but we're still ever changing, and is making sure that our website has the most up-to-date information about what's going on in Reston when it comes to land use. We're going to be working very closely with the Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee too, because part of land use is getting around in Reston, whether that's by bike, on foot, or on wheel, or by rail. It is important for Reston to know what projects are upcoming, either that we are undertaking or that the county or state are undertaking to get around. If you haven't noticed, one of the things that we've done along with that is make sure that we're putting out regular reports on land use. Kelsey Steffen on a weekly basis puts out information on any upcoming meetings. The board of directors receives that, and anyone who has signed up for her www.landuseatreston.org. She will send information directly to you if you want to be kept up to date on it. Also, as I said, everything is available on our website. So Objective 4 we feel is complete, and yet it's also underway and ongoing. It's a very important effort, and again, a lot more coming on that this evening. Objective 5, develop a 12-month plan to inform and engage our diverse community about RA amenities, programs, services, and natural resources. I made some last-minute updates to this presentation about a half an hour ago, and a couple of the graphics that I put on here, I know our board has access to, but they're not showing. But 2 very important activities that we consider this underway. We're putting together a plan, but things that we have underway right now include some fantastic work that has been done by one of the board's advisory committees, and that is the Environmental Advisory Committee. 2 months ago, they just completed a RACER report. The board of directors in the consent calendar this evening just passed a list of 6 objectives that staff will be working very closely with the advisory committee to undertake. This is an engagement opportunity. It's working closely with our membership to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure Reston is environmentally sustainable through trees, trails, and thoughtful design, as well as how we take care of our natural resources. Another thing that advisory committee is doing, again, engaging directly with the membership, is a litter pilot program that's being conducted at Lake Newport Soccer Field. For 2 weeks in a row now, we have put up some signs that say, keep Reston green, to keep it green, keep it clean, encouraging the sports groups that use that athletic facility to pick up their trash, use the recycling cans and trash cans that we have there. So we get regular reports. We hope to report out to the board that engagement that we're having directly with the sports groups is working, and we're going to be able to address some of our little problem in Reston and take it elsewhere. Sherry mentioned the fantastic, I believe it was fantastic. I very much engaged with the 20 or so members that I had on my bus for the bus tour. Instead of what we have done ever since I've arrived at Reston is hold a newcomers night where there were several booths actually around this room or other facilities that we've been in for people to go and learn about Reston. Instead, what we did, and this was a concept that was put in place by our volunteer coordinator, Ha Brock, along with the rest of her team, with Mike Leone and the communications and community engagement team, engagement was the key, is instead of having members come to us, why don't we have them come to us at one of our facilities and take them on a tour of the community. Talk to them about how Reston was put together by our founder, Robert E. Simon, all of the different amenities that are available to the community, to them, and it really was a great success. We had 40 people that participated, and we already have a list of people who are ready for the next one. We thought this would be an annual event. Staff are trying to figure out how they can get this on my calendar to make it a quarterly event. It is well worth the time. As Sherry said, we had several residents, brand new residents, just a few months old, didn't know each other, were fast friends. There were a couple of times like, you guys are going to have to break it up. You're talking too much to each other. So that's what Reston is all about. We were really trying to instill the sense of belonging and involvement right away, and it's a great engagement opportunity. The other picture that you see up there is of Hook Road. Right now we have underway the Hook Road Recreation Project. It's a capital project. Lots of communications, lots of lessons learned from the prior year on how best to engage the community, not only by sending out direct mailings, by putting out sandwich board signs, emails, but actually saying, come and participate. Because really our recreation facilities belong to our membership, and it's really them who need to tell us what's best, either whether there's around the surrounding neighborhood or in other parts of the community. So later this evening you will be approving the working group. We had well over 30 that registered who wanted to become a part of that working group and engage with us on that recreation facility. So while Goal 5 or Objective 5 is underway, lots has been done to work toward that in a very meaningful way, beyond what you see written in the report. With Objective 6, it says develop a detailed marketing plan geared toward increasing facility program usage and revenues. This is underway. We look forward to presenting to the board next month the marketing plan. And when Mike Leone and I started working on this objective, one of the things that we knew we were going to need is help in putting it together. So Mike said, what if we reached out to our local partnering university, George Mason University, to see what assistance they could provide us in putting that together? I'm proud to say that we now have 3 interns working with us to help put together a marketing plan. We are laser focused on our facility rentals right now. We're looking at Lake House, our RA Conference Center. George Mason happens to use the RA Conference Center to teach some of its own courses. They use this once a week to teach courses here. But also some of the other, the association's other facilities and community buildings like picnic pavilions. So they're working with us to come up with some promotional materials, how to get a marketing plan out for that. I look forward to presenting that to you next month, so you can learn a little bit more about it. But what's most important about this objective, as well as the one that I spoke of before, is that Reston Association right now is in the process of a culture shift. When Reston Association was first established and we were putting programs on in accordance with our policies, the bylaw policies, to foster the fullest usage of the land and leisure time activities, staff were hired to develop and put on a program. They weren't hired to market the program. So what Mike Leone and I saw as an opportunity is if we really want to draw people in, we need to change the face and the culture of it. We're really asking a lot of some of our staff to attempt to market a program in addition to put it on. So he's looking very closely at what he's doing to put that together. I didn't mention it, but back in Objective 5, one of the other things that his staff have just completed, they worked from June until October to put together a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, one of the most important goals, and again, this is attached to the CEO report, is evaluating and leveraging feedback. Reston Association collects quite a bit of information from people who participate in our programs or go through one of our services, whether it's going through a covenants administration process with DRB, whether it's registering for a program, whether it's participating in a program. We need to use that data, leverage it in order to market and enhance the services that we provide, whether it's adjusting how we're doing business and conducting DRB application review session, or the types of programs that people are interested in. All of this can be used by all of the different committees as well as the board of directors, and regular reports will soon be coming to the board on the statistics and information that we're finding. Like the member listening sessions that were held, we learned a lot from those sessions and what was important to members. So more of that will be coming. With Objective 7, it was to develop a framework for measuring the cost effectiveness of the association's amenities and programs. So while this objective was completed in May, because it is something that our recreation staff look at, having a key framework was important. And as soon as our treasurer, Sridhar, came on board with us, he really wanted to take a deep dive into that data and take a look at how we were looking at cost effectiveness and existence. So he has done that. There's going to be more to come on that. And I look forward to working with you, Sridhar, as well as the fiscal committee as we really dive into that. But it is something that the association undertakes. We made sure that we did that when we were putting together the 18-19 operating budgets for the organization. With Objective 8, use technology solutions to track data and present information to the board that's really going to go toward the 18-19 budget. So one of the great pieces that we were able to get over the past year up and running, now that we have a year's worth of data, is that Rec Track program. It's not just for selling pool and tennis passes, it's also used for registering folks for programs. What we were able to do earlier this month is take data that we had collected for people who had registered for specific programs and turn that into a way to increase participation numbers. The photograph that you see up there, the graphic that you see, is something that was put out on October the 11th, a brand new electronic email push on just our recreation programs. The feature there was a program that was not going to occur before the 11th because we didn't have enough registration. Because of what we pushed out, we were able to fill that program plus. So, again, I've talked about we're going through a culture shift. What we're used to in the organization is creating a flyer and handing it out. That's not the way the world works now. That's not how people find out about programs and register. So we are shifting how we're doing business, and already it's beginning to pay dividends for us on that. Objective 9, decrease 2017 operating expenses in real costs by at least 2%. I am pleased to tell you that we have accomplished that goal for this year. We are, with the September financials, we were at 2.17% that we were able to reduce expenses. More to come on this. I don't want to steal the thunder of our treasurer, who I know is going to be giving a full report in November as to where we are with our financials, but I am pleased to report that we have met that objective. Objective 10, identify opportunities now to increase non-assessment revenue by 10% for the 2018 budget, as well as decrease operating expenses and real costs by at least 3%. Both of those objectives have been met and are in the 2018-19 budget proposal that you have, that we're going to be having a public hearing on. But what I'm really excited to tell you about is already our recreation staff have secured commitments for $10,000 worth of cash sponsorships to go toward our senior movie day program. So that was just realized over the past 2 weeks, again, by the excellent efforts and marketing acumen of our Mike Leone and him educating our recreation staff on how best to make the ask. And when you've got a great product to sell, people want to be a part of it. So that's really exciting to us, and I wanted to report that out to you this evening. Objective 11 is to establish internal controls in accordance with best practices. This is something, of course, that has been a highlight of the organization since last year. With the Stone Turn report coming out, it was very clear and very important that we put specific processes in place so we can check how we're doing business. While for years staff have worked with keeping it all in their head on the process of how to do what, it's never been written down. Robert Wood, our CFO, as well as Garrett Skinner, our Director of Capital Projects, have undertaken that. They're just in the final throes of finishing documenting our processes in important areas like accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, and capital projects, literally detailing how things are done. During this process, what we have learned after we've documented, we found gaps. So we're putting processes in place to fill those gaps. Robert is also undertaking the effort. He's not been asked to do it, but it's very typical of him because he is so conscientious that he's already identifying possible risks if things aren't done properly. I look forward to working with our treasurer as well as the fiscal committee to double check those documents to make sure that we haven't left anything out, because the audit that is to come, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later this evening, is very important to this organization and how we do business. So that is underway. Look forward by the end of the year being complete, and look forward to working with the newly seated fiscal committee on that. Last but not least is Objective 12, and that is my education and making sure that I stay up with the best and latest practices. I can report out that I've completed some hours of training with BoardSource, also with the Community Association Institute, and with an executive coach from George Mason University. His name is Steve Gladys. Toward that, I've got about 11 more training hours to go before the end of the year, but it's been incredibly valuable, especially when it comes to working with boards, working with the communities, and doing what's right for the organization. So I do appreciate that the board supports continuing education. That is all that I have for you to report out. Any questions from the board?
Thank you, Kate, for going into a little bit more detail than we did last quarter, actually a lot more detail. But I think it's important that not only the board but the community understands all the stuff that's going on that every single day that we sort of, I think, take for granted. But it's nice to highlight it and to see the progress we've made over the course of the first 3 quarters of the year. So thank you for sharing all that. I know that was a lot to put together. But thank you. Okay. We are on to member comments, and because I'm looking at the audience, we're going to give everybody 5 seconds this time instead of your 3 minutes, because that's about all we're going to have time for. So get up, give your name, address, give it quick, and we'll be done. No, I'm just kidding. We would never do that. Remember when you come up for member, I don't have the list. Rob, the list out there of people that have signed up. You don't have to have signed up, but it just gives us a feel for how many people would like to speak tonight. I think Kate just went to get it.
Kate's gone, okay. Kate, come back.
Remember, when you come up, just state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to talk on your topic. We will, I don't know if we'll have a sound since we don't have Sabrina. I just might get up and yell and scream. Okay,
I'll keep time.
so we'll have a timer. It's going to be really important tonight, especially with all y'all in the audience, to try to stay on time. So you get, she said she would do it. So we have 3 minutes. Unless you're representing a group, you have 5 minutes. And the group doesn't mean like your household. It means like a community group, like a cluster or something, or an association, or like the tennis folks. Just by show of hands, how many here about tennis? Oh boy. Okay. Okay, so we have a bunch of tennis players on the board, just so you know. Okay, so we'll start with the list. You can defer to talking when we get to that topic if you choose to. Keep in mind, except except for Victoria, we're an older board, so we tend to forget. So if you talk about something now, by the time we get to the topic, we might have forgotten what you said. So you could defer to talk when we get to that topic if you choose to. Otherwise, you can certainly take the podium now. So first we have Phil. And he keeps laughing and smiling at my jokes, so you can have as much time as you want. He does. He keeps.
Just one question. Which is the clicker for the advancement of
You have a
slide?
presentation, sir. Okay, first let me put that up for you.
Sabrina Silverhead?
Okay.
Well, there'll be others who need
That
to
be-
know how to click. Yeah, that's the one that's the only one I need. Thank you. Oh, so we'll just ask you to advance it?
Actually, what I have for you,
Yeah, I thought there was a remote.
there you go.
Thank you, Karen.
welcome, sir.
That's what an executive. And, okay.
Is that the correct
The
slide?
next one, I'll figure it out. My name is Phil Lilienthal. I live at 11400 Orchard Lane. I've been a Reston resident since 1967. Happy anniversary. It was 50 years ago this month that we moved in. Over the years, the tennis community has put up with being given less than equitable treatment in the Reston sports scene. As you can see from the graph, other areas have gotten far more capital and operating funds, and we just think that the facilities have deteriorated enough that it's time to get an equitable share. Now, RA provided a vision for a top tennis program when you provided funding for the groundbreaking hard-true courts with underground watering in the 90s at Glade and North Hills. That provided Reston with courts worthy of a real tennis community. It's time to maintain those courts and move ahead with needed maintenance and repair to those and the other courts in Reston. Those following me will show you that there is an important and urgent need for the following. At North Hills, and I was delighted to see that the budget has been either tweaked or publicized, the proposal to cover some of these, but the irrigation I don't believe is in that capital expense. And if we're doing resurfacing, lights, repair, we need lights and fence repair, as well as access to the bathroom. The irrigation is really what makes sense, because for all kinds of sophisticated and practical reasons, the underground irrigation is sensational. And it was very adventuresome when you put that in. At Hook Road, we need better lighting and installation of a permanent bathroom facility. We need access to bathroom facilities, which are at 4 pools already adjacent to tennis courts, but there's no access to them when the pools are not open. We need to improve lighting on all 26 lighted courts. It needs to reach a minimal acceptable industry standard. We are far below that right now. We need to repair tennis courts with cracks and depressions in them that can cause injury, especially the depressions. Now, indoor tennis, consider and review past reports on the importance, need, timeliness, and cost of an indoor tennis facility, and how this would further help build a sense of community in Reston and its particular importance to children, teens, and seniors. Compare the cost, revenues, and net income of indoor facilities in our area. I've seen 2 of them at Wheaton and I forget which other one, but they are very profitable and they return about 20 or 25% of revenues as net income. Prioritize recreational activities that RA actually runs, such as swimming and tennis, rather than sports run by other organizations that have their own sources of revenue, and consider the health benefits of tennis. The thousands of Restonians who play tennis have suffered from RA's reluctance to take a position of courage in deciding on indoor tennis. We've seen RA retreat from advocating what would be a benefit to the community to timidly appeasing a handful of complaining homeowners in neighborhoods adjoining a proposed indoor facility. Only in heaven will it be possible to have an indoor facility that affects no one adversely. We urge you to realize that a community is not developed by allowing a tiny minority of reluctant homeowners the veto power over a facility for the community good. Is that me? Already? No, I timed it. I was nowhere close. Anyway, I've spent my life working with children. I've been working at camps in 3 countries over the last 45 years for children and also adults, Kate. I know that kids who all they want is choice in their lives. If they have choice and they have it removed, they're much more likely to get involved in undesirable activities. Let's keep the kids who thrive on tennis involved in tennis with a robust indoor program in our home area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert? Avern. Again, I ask that you try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less even.
Try. I am a pediatric dentist in Reston. I moved here in 1974.
We need you to just, sorry, sir, state your name and address, please.
Okay, Dr. Robert Avern, 11442 Waterdew Cluster, Reston, Virginia. I'm a boy from Brooklyn who thought tennis was only a sport for rich kids and Yankee fans. Very few of those in my neighborhood. When I decided to move to Reston, part of the reason was the availability of year-round tennis programs and the quality of life, the architecture, and the spirit of the community. Both my wife and son participated in tennis. David was able to play all year round and wound up playing tennis in high school. And I have a deep commitment to what tennis can provide. At this stage of my life, I play mostly on clay courts. They're much kinder to the body of seniors, and they're very important for the development of younger players. Strategically, it's a different kind of game. They have different skills, and much more patience is necessary. The Northland courts are aging much worse than I am, I think, and less gracefully. If you could advance a picture for me, how do I do that? Thank you very much. What you can see here is between courts 3 and 4, the advanced irrigation system that was installed in the 1990s exposed pipes. This is from erosion and the fact that the system is aging, which Phil had talked about. The water also fails to reach in the system the courts behind the baselines, and which are deteriorating because of erosion and dryness. We have the water bins on the next slide. There's water seeping from water bins, which provide the underground water, but also because of the lack of integrity of the surface and depressions, rain accumulates dramatically and makes the courts unplayable. And normally, clay courts are wonderful when there's a rain. They absorb the water. They dry very quickly. Yeah, it is. It is. We have on the next slide, please. There's water seeping from the bins outside, again, because of their failure and their aging. We also have a lack of bathroom facilities. If you can advance the next slide, that's just some more water in the slide after that. That's our bathroom. I've never done it, but you just walk behind the building, and if nobody's looking, you relieve yourself. We have no access to the swimming pool bathroom. So basically what we need is a door cut in the swimming pool with access from the tennis side with a combination lock that will not permit anybody from the tennis courts to go into the pool area, but just directly into a bathroom. Lighting, you're better off with a pocket flashlight. It's basically almost impossible. And as the systems age, they've lost about 60% of their lumen capacity. And clay courts also don't reflect light as much as hard courts, so pretty much we're not capable of playing at night. In my practice of pediatric dentistry, I've seen thousands of children, and I always talk about their activities, their interests, and tennis is something I always recommend, and I say, even if you don't like it, when you're an adult, you only need one person. You don't need 20. You don't need 3 hours. You just need 1 hour. It's a sport that requires every athletic skill. And I even remember talking with Calvin Hill when we used to have an indoor court. His son was taking tennis lessons at the same time I was, and he was opposed to his son playing football. And he was giving him tennis instructions because it's a sport that demands intelligence, development of strategies, and you pretty much are self-coaching yourself. So the loss of the indoor courts I think has been a tremendous loss for all of us, especially young people. The lack of indoor tennis forces them to leave Reston at a critical stage in their development. This, I think, is a loss to the image and pride of Reston. It's much more expensive for them and for anybody else who wants to play tennis during the winter. And all that money supports programs outside of Reston.
Sir, could you wrap up your comments?
Yes, I would ask the board to please consider supporting the recommendations in our petition, and thank you very much for your time.
Charles Saunders?
Hello, I'm Charles Saunders, live at 11446 Orchard Lane, Waterview Cluster in Reston. Been a resident since 1975, avid tennis player throughout. And I wanted to pick up where my neighbor and friend Bob left off regarding the clay courts at North Hills. That's where I play 90% of my tennis. I wanted to focus particularly on not only the recreational benefits, but the health benefits of those courts. Certainly, middle-aged and older players were particularly acutely aware of those health benefits, but for younger players as well. One of my tennis partners has a good friend who's an orthopedic surgeon who has told him on numerous occasions that those who play tennis predominantly on hard courts are one of his major sources of knee and hip replacement surgeries. The hard true courts are much gentler on the joints, the knees, the hips, the back. So again, I think those health benefits are critical, and we need them on both sides of Reston. We've got, I guess, the Glade courts are somewhat newer, but it's important to have access to those courts, I think, on both the north and south sides of the community. Also, I gather these renovations were planned from the outset. It's roughly a 25-year cycle, and North Hills is now reaching the end of that 25-year cycle. So in order to sustain the benefits that these courts provide, we really do need to make the investment. I did want to comment on the incredible work that the RA staff have done maintaining the North Hills courts. They're playing far beyond what they ought to be, even this year, despite all the difficulties. It's been a delight playing there, but they have to expend incredible time and effort to overcome all the obstacles that they confront daily to keep those courts playable. So again, would like to commend the efforts of the RA staff, but I think we realize near-term benefits in terms of reduced O&M operations and maintenance costs if we could restore the courts as originally planned and intended and budgeted. Bob alluded to the lighting. I no longer play on those courts at night because the lighting is just so deficient. It's just so I'm a early morning or a late afternoon player. Used to enjoy playing at night, particularly in the summers, but in the summertime. But the lighting is so deficient at this point. That's not an option. Bob mentioned access to the bathroom facilities. I haven't yet had to avail myself of those facilities, but I've had plenty of partners who ducked behind the shed when nature called. We're losing Hartrue out the front side of the courts because the old barriers that prevented the Hartrue from washing out now washes down into the grass anytime we have a heavy rain in that area. What else? I think that covers the highlights. I did want to also just put in a brief plug for indoor courts.
I do need you to wrap up pretty.
Right, indoor. Well, I think it's a disgrace that a community like this no longer has the indoor courts. I enjoyed them for 10 years or more before we lost them 25 years ago. Reston has one of the most extensive and diverse tennis programs in the entire metro Washington area, and we really, by rights, ought to have an indoor program. So anything we can do. Tennis is muscle memory driven. You need to play year-round if at all possible. So please, I know it's going to take some creativity, but we really need to bring those options back to the Reston tennis community. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Jerry Katz. Sir, I'll ask you again to please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, I will.
We have a long night.
My name is Jerry Katz. I'm 11659 Newbridge Court. And I moved here 37 years ago. And the primary reason was to play tennis. And that's one of the reasons why I still stay here. One of the reasons is, great tennis program. And I usually boast to people in other parts of the country, I travel all around the nation, how great the tennis program is, how great the staff is, and how we have 26 lit courts. However, I'm not telling them the whole truth. Of course, they're only semi-lit. The lighting is very, very poor. So my objective in my 3 minutes is to convince the board that the lighting is very, very poor at the courts in Reston. And hopefully you'll also take short-term and immediate action to rectify some of those lighting issues. About myself, I'm a physics major, and I've been a physics and energy educator for the last 45 years. So let's start with a little physics. Let's take a look at lux and how they measure lighting. And for pro courts, and we only have a couple pro players right here, that's 1,000 lux, and we're not going to do that. College is 600, club play is 500, and the minimum for tennis, parks, and recreation is 400. None of the 26 courts even comes close. I think the ones at Alderwood, because they have 8 versus 6 poles, you're getting into the low 300s. But not a single court meets the minimum. There was a report and a study done a year ago in October, and had all those tested at different locations, and they are very, very bad, very, very low. I mean, it's almost like playing at twilight when you play on those courts. And when you look at some of the courts, like Shadowwood, North Hills, and Hook, they're in the 70s and 80s. And remember, the minimum is 400. So you can imagine how dim that is. So there's no debate, and I think you've heard from some other people, it's very, very poor lighting on the Reston courts. Some people refuse to play. Now, as Charlie Saunders just mentioned, I'm the same thing, Charlie. I used to play at night, especially when I was working. But, you can't play at night, so I'm a daytime player now, but I would love during the summer to be able to play in the evening. When they did this study and measurements a year ago, they found out that the Exxon station on Sunrise Valley and the Sunoco station in South Lakes had better lighting than our tennis courts. So if you see people playing out there, you'll know why. As I mentioned.
Good.
Okay. Also, a lot of people that we play with in Reston are not Restonians, but there's no other place to play at night, especially they're working, so they pay their $260 and they get a tennis pool pass, but it's really just for tennis. So there alone, that's worth it. I'll start very quickly. Okay, so very quickly, being a physics educator, I'm not going to talk about lux, but I will basically talk about lighting. The lighting we have now degrades every year around 10%. We're around 40%, not 100%. I would suggest we change those bulbs right away for immediate action, and that'll bring us back up to 100%, and maybe change them every couple of years to keep them going. Also, better ballast will also increase the longevity and of those lights. But of course, the best thing is LEDs. LEDs will be payback period will be very short, and you'll be making money for those years after, and everyone will have a much better time. That's mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ted Shin.
Good evening. My name is Ted Shin. I live at 12503 Foxview Way, Reston. I am speaking in favor of funding for the tennis facility renovations, as the speakers before me have also addressed. I am a holder of a tennis pass. I've benefited from tennis lessons. My son is also beneficiary of the wonderful youth programs here. Reston Tennis is a vital component of the Reston community, involving adult and youth participants. It also serves as a vital community outreach tool for those who have an interest in tennis, but not the economic means to participate. quality of the Reston Association tennis facilities has significantly declined after several years of no or reduced capital funding, as was shown earlier. In 3 of the last 6 years of capital budgets, 2012, 2015, and 2016, tennis facilities have received no funding at all. 2017 budget did provide $46,000 to fund color coding at Barton Hill and Colts Neck, but even that had been reduced to $34,000 after resurfacing for Shadow Wood was postponed. We have many challenges in terms of maintenance on the hard courts. Major cracks run through the length and width of multiple autumn wood courts. Lisa, where are the slides?
Excuse me, that's a tree limb blocking the light.
Okay, so yeah, so that's the first one in terms of the autumn wood courts, and there's a second one. Oops, am I going the wrong way?
Yes, sir. There you
All
go.
right. And there's a second one in terms of the actual autumn wood courts. Similar cracks exist at the Shadow Wood courts. Autumn wood and Shadow Wood are 2 main lesson and league play facilities. Significant bumps and ridges, slopes, and depressions also persist at Lake Newport, Newbridge, Colts Neck, Upper Lakes, Autumn Wood, and Shadow Wood. We've already said Autumn Wood and Shadow Wood, sorry. But the depressions at, especially at Newbridge, have resulted in persistent pooling of water, as shown here, which has led to mold forming on the courts, which has created a very serious safety concern. There's been many incidences of people falling and slipping on those particular courts. And so while we do appreciate the fact that there has been color coding placed into the budget, we feel as though that's really not sufficient. So therefore, the color coding that's planned for Lake Newport, Autumn Wood, Shadow Wood, and Upper Lakes should be upgraded to deep resurfacing, laser leveling, and color coding to address these safety concerns and multiple maintenance issues that we have. Additionally, the stopgap fixes for the netting, headbands as shown here, as well as infrequent maintenance of the benches, which were donated by past and present tennis members entrusted to RA's care, have contributed to a somewhat shabby appearance of Reston's tennis facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Shin?
Yes.
Kate, do we have a copy of his comments? Could we have,
My copy?
or a copy somehow?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay,
I can send a copy.
if you could email it to Kate? maybe?
Yes, Kate with a C at reston.org.
Absolutely.
Bertha Hoskins.
My name's Bertha Hoskins, and I live at 2202 Spinnaker Court. About the turn of the century, I was a Reston Association member, board member too. And at that time, I worked with the tennis community, the tennis committee, staff, and other board members to fund the permanent restrooms at Lake Newport. And they have really been great for the tennis community. We really appreciate those. I am a tennis player, and I utilize a lot of Reston Association's tennis programs. So I know the crumbling conditions on the courts that the other folks have spoken of, and in particular, the lack of bathroom facilities. The one site that has a semi-permanent bathroom facility that people spoke about before is the Hook Road facility. And that is a porta-john that's there a portion of the year. On days in the summer, that porta-john is a hot, disgusting mess. That site also has the other activities that were mentioned earlier, the basketball and Reston Youth baseball. My son played baseball on those fields. At that time, they used the woods for the bathroom, and as a mother, I'm not sure if he was playing there today, I would let him use that porta-john. He would be going to the woods still. Hook Road needs a permanent bathroom facility similar to what we have at Lake Newport. Also, at the sites where there's a tennis court and a pool, tennis players need access to those pool bathrooms after hours. You saw the picture of North Hills where people use the bathroom behind the utility shed. We also have to go into the woods at Uplands, Shadowwood, Newbridge, and that's just not acceptable for Reston to have our people going to the bathroom in the woods. So we need to set up access into those pools after pool hours. I understand that all the upgrades we're talking about and improvements can't be done in 1 year. I've been on the board, I know the process. But I believe we need to develop a prioritized 4 to 5 year plan to upgrade the tennis facilities. And we need to fund that plan and beginning with this budget cycle. Just like we've done for the pools, the tennis facilities need to be upgraded and modernized to support the needs of the Reston community. These tennis facilities, as you've heard, our tennis programs are one of the amenities in Reston that draws people here. I believe the board needs to ensure that the tennis facilities are brought up to the level that the Reston community can be proud of.
Renzo Sanyo. That's a familiar name.
Good evening. My name is Renzo Sanyo. I live on 1307 Sawbridge Way. I just turned 15 years old, and I'm here to talk to you on behalf of the youth on what is needed to improve tennis in Reston. First, I think we can all agree that tennis is a wonderful sport.
Sorry.
Is Mike on the film?
So sorry.
All right. I think we can all agree that tennis is a wonderful sport and needs to be widely available for all juniors at all skill levels in Reston. This is so important to give kids something to look forward to in their day, get them involved in a healthy activity, and that they can participate in and get them involved in a healthy activity that they can participate in for many years and keep many kids out of trouble. I got into tennis through an after-school program at Buzz Aldrin Elementary with Coach Chum Bertrand when I was 6 years old and continued with the Reston programs for 7 more years. This gave me a great foundation for improvement. Reston has a great program for young developing players, starting with an introductory red ball training at North Shore Short Courts for children 8 and under, followed by orange ball, green dot, and ultimately regular yellow ball, junior varsity, and the high school development programs. For those that are more serious about the sport, they need to train year-round to reach a competitive level. This is just not possible for all the very talented players in Reston without having to commute to other indoor clubs such as Fairfax, Trome, and College Park. This can easily be changed by having an indoor facility which was desperately needed by the greater Reston tennis community. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Anton.
Frantically editing my remarks, not be redundant. Karen Anton, 11714 Dry River Court. I am here to talk about senior tennis in Reston. There are at least 100 seniors who participate in the senior round robin and senior drop-in tennis, in addition to those seniors who play on the Reston teams. We are a vital part of the overall tennis community here. We've heard about the health benefits. We all know about the health benefits of tennis, but of particular importance to older adults. Reduced risk of heart disease, lower blood pressure, increased muscle development, improved flexibility, balance, and coordination, which can result in fewer falls. Brain development. Tennis challenges the brain in ways that other exercises may not. It requires creativity, tactical thinking, and coordination, which helps keep our brains active. These mental skills can decline after people retire because they may not be using those skills so much anymore. Increase in bone density is so important to older adults. In a study at Southern Connecticut State University, tennis players scored higher in self-esteem, vigor, and optimism, and lower in confusion, tension, anxiety, and depression. And tennis gets you out and keeps you active, and it creates long-term friendships, I know. So we seniors play for those physical, psychological, and social benefits that tennis gives us, and of course because we love the game. We are not just a community, we're a family. But some of our matters are not as strong as they once were, so we need access to bathrooms. Senior round robin and drop-in are 2 hours long. We need access to bathrooms.
We hear you, we hear you.
The expense to provide access at adjacent pools, such as the one that now exists at Autumnwood, is minimal. We need that at Uplands and the other courts that are by pools. And again, we need a permanent bathroom at Hook Road. I know that's part of the project that's underway, which is great. And we need indoor tennis in Reston. Come on, it's time. We've had it in the past. We're tired of giving our money to Herndon and other indoor facilities. And lastly, I would like to dispel the notion that some people have that tennis is an elitist sport. I don't know, maybe this is a throwback to the days when people played tennis only at country clubs, but of course that's changed, and we in Reston are so fortunate to have all these wonderful courts to play on. And all you need is a tennis pass, you need a decent racket, a good pair of shoes, and a can of balls, all which can be had for $150 to $200. Not an elitist sport. So, while it's good that the board is reviewing the North Hills piece of the budget, that's great, but like others have before me, I would like to urge that you consider a multi-year plan to address all of the issues in the petition that over 200 people have signed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jeff Rocket.
So my name is Jeff Rocket. I live at 12145 Eddies Park Drive in Herndon. I am a non-resident member, have been for about 20 years, and somewhat happily pay my pass fee every year. Clay courts are special. They don't exist in a lot of places around the United States in a public setting. I know I've lived a lot of places. Somewhat esoteric from a non-tennis player's point of view, but it's special. It's very special. We're proud of these courts. And we want to see them continued on into the future. The health benefits have been espoused here, all very true. I also find them somewhat forgiving when a racket is tossed idly to the court with anger. That happens sometimes as well. But no, we are very proud of these courts. People who come to visit and play as guests comment, wow, you have clay courts, public clay courts? This is a country club discussion almost. It is not an elitist sport anymore, but it is very special to have clay courts. And if you're not a player, check it out sometime. They're very, very nice. The atmosphere is very great out there. So tonight I rise in support of funding the North Hills courts and the renovations that are being discussed. I appreciate your time. I know that the resources are always finite. I know you guys have a lot of tough choices to make, but we ask that you consider that these courts be preserved, protected, and extended into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty Lentz. We gotta have a song for her. She's like comes and talks to us every month.
Every meeting.
I'm Patty Lentz. I'm a 27-year Reston resident, and I'm not talking about tennis.
Yes.
I've handed you a page, and I'm just going to state a couple of things from this. Having attended the Fairfax County public meetings September 25th and October 23rd, I'm requesting the Board of Directors to draft a letter to the Fairfax County Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, stating what they consider the current voice or concerns of the Reston residents in regard to the current amendment of increasing the planned residential community persons per acre value from 13 to 16 persons per acre. At that meeting, so many Reston residents feel the county staff and Supervisor Hudgens are not listening to what has been presented. Respectfully, I am asking this board to consider acknowledging in the letter requested, which does not mean taking a stand as a board, but for what appears to be evident, the strong opposition of Reston residents to the PRC amendment and addressing their concerns. I consider this an important action in providing Reston residents at least some closure in support of the members this board represents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty. Rick Hamilton?
I'm Rick Hamilton, 12629 Thunder Chase Drive. I'm the president of the Polo Fields Homeowners Association. And I'm here not to talk about tennis, even though I do that. I'm here to talk about the Sunrise Valley wetlands. And first, just a terrific thank you to the Environmental Committee for even acknowledging that the wetlands exist. Our supervisor doesn't seem to care about it. And thanks to Victoria for letting me know that this was going to be on the consent agenda. It was once one of the most beautiful places in Reston. It was serene, and it has fallen into disrepair, lack of maintenance. There are now private property signs seemingly prohibiting you. We ignore that anyway. But the ponds have now been totally consumed by water lilies, so all the birds have left the area. And we look forward to working with the board on whatever you decide to do about the wetlands. We're just thrilled that you actually acknowledge that they exist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kay Ward?
Catherine Ward. I live at 2077 Amberjack Court, and I do not play tennis anymore, but I would support everything that my fellow residents said about upgrading the tennis facilities. I also would like to go on record I am a swimmer and I am a kayaker, and I'm here to speak about boat access. But as a swimmer, I would encourage you to do everything possible to reinstate the pool hours that we as Reston residents have enjoyed for so long. I'm a kayaker. I have 2 kayaks. I do kayak on Lake Audubon. I do see that you are going to upgrade the ramp there. Thank you. But I live near Lake Thoreau, and the access to Lake Thoreau for us kayakers is very, very limited. I would like to address the facility, the kayak or access facility near Lake Thoreau Pool. There's a dock, and then there's actually just a muddy slide where we actually could put in. It's terrible. There are roots of trees. I think it's probably not a major fix, but I would strongly encourage you to look at providing, and it would be a hand carry access. Also, I see that you are providing a sizable amount of money for Lake Thoreau dredging and improvements to the Pebble Beach retaining wall. I would like to ask that as part of that retaining wall project, which is funded for $58,000, that you provide hand carry ramp access for kayakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Canner.
I'm Stephen Canna. I live at 1417 Belcastle Court. And I just wanted to give you a little feedback on the meeting Monday night on the density issue. It was quite a happening. I mean, there were about 800 or 900 people in the hall, all wearing yellow shirts. And everybody who spoke, except one person, spoke against the plan to increase the density cap from 13 to 16. And this was, and the pushback that the staff of the planning office was giving us is that this is in the master plan. This is in the master plan. You go from 13 to 16. It's part of the master plan. Finally, somebody spoke up and said, what is it we have to do to change the master plan? Well, it's scheduled for review in 2020. We don't want to wait till 2020. We want to do it now. What does it take? Well, you have to engage your supervisor. And this is what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. If you haven't seen the YouTubes, the Facebook postings of Red Reston Now, this community does not need, does not want to have more density. Robert Simon, God bless him, he would turn over in his grave if he saw Sunrise Valley, how it's being developed, try to get down Wheelie Avenue during rush hour or Sunset Hills. So I would encourage you to do whatever it is that you can as a follow-up to get this thing on hold. Let's have a rational discussion with the supervisors that's not pre-cooked, and so that we can get our community back in the Reston way of life. Also, I found it as striking as do you. There's no demand analysis. The day before this meeting, there were articles on Reston Now about developers trying to get rid of their properties because there's an oversupply. And what's the answer that our supervisor gives us? Well, we have to build more so we can get more revenue. It's crazy. So please, get a hold of this. Help us out. Preserve the Reston way of life.
Thank you. So that's all that has signed up for the first set of member comments. I do notice that we have people that have signed up for the different sections, so we'll come back to our list once we hit those sections. So at this point, we will move on to item F, which is the committee appointments for both the DRB and the Hook Road Working Group appointments. I just, Kate talked a little bit about this in her overview of her goals. About the Hook Road Working Group, just kind of the process we went through was a little bit different than we use in most of our committee appointments. We did have well over 30 people apply to be on that working group, and obviously you can't get really anything done with a working group of over 30 people. And also we interview committee members. The Board Operations Committee interviews all committee members. So when we saw the list of how many people there were, I went to Kate and her folks and said, please, can you make this a little bit easier so it doesn't take us 4 days to interview all these different people. So what we did is we put people in their clusters by their, where they live. Even if they're not in a cluster, we grouped them together. And we ended up interviewing those groups together. So at least they knew what neighbors were interested in also in being on the working group. And I think that worked pretty well and probably will prove as a model moving forward. So we were able to come up with 15 folks, which is what our goal was. And we went ahead and asked, what we didn't have on the working group and we thought was important was to go ahead and ask our Reston accessibility group or committee, Fredgren. I don't know why I can't ever get that name. we reached out to him, Kate did, and asked if they were interested in having a rep on that group, and he did indeed appoint somebody or ask somebody to join our group. So we do have now 16 members of the group, and we will tonight we will be voting to approve them, as well as the two folks on the DRB. One election and one DRB, if I remember right. So there's a motion in our packet. Does anybody have that close?
Yep, I can.
I'm not on that page.
Would you like me to read it?
Please.
Move to approve the appointment of Mike Martin as a member of the Elections Committee for a term of 3 years ending in October 2020. Want the second part as well? Or just do it as one? The appointment of Charlie Hoffman as a lay member on the Design Review Board for the remainder of the vacant seats term ending in March 2019.
So let's do that first.
Second.
Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. I know, I got it backwards, just trying to liven it up a little bit. Okay, and there was another motion as well?
That was it. Right there.
Since you're on a roll, Victoria?
Am I on a roll?
I think so.
Move to appoint the following individuals of the Hook Road Working Group. That's a TBD, so does anyone have that list?
It's on the new, it's in the new
It's a-
packet.
Yeah,
Oh.
Do you
I
have
can
it?
read. Yeah, I have it in front if you want me to.
Sorry.
Okay, move to appoint the following individuals to the Hook Road Working Group: Anna Levitt, Aaron Webb, Todd Carter, Inchi Ankara, Keith Shoemaker, Alicia Hernandez, Stuart Gibson, Ryan Mahoney, Jerry Hoy, John J. McCracken, John Pinkman, Jason Walker, Frank Taboni, Elaine Killoran, Patty Lenz, and Colin Mills.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations and welcome to the committee. We're going to start working right away, so clear your calendars. I'm kidding.
The next conference is open.
So there is, for the Hook Road group, there is one more meeting of the community to meet, not the working group, but the community as a whole on the 2nd over there at Lake House. It's the 3rd of 3. And then we will begin pretty much first part of next month with the working group and getting that started. And I'm excited to be a part. I'm going to be the board liaison, so yay. And so there we have it.
That last community meeting begins at 7?
7, I believe so.
It's Thursday night, right?
The 2nd, whatever the 2nd is. It's 7 o'clock at the Lake House. If anybody hasn't participated that would like to participate, please come out for that. Okay, so we're on to item G, which is a public hearing on a proposed 2018 operating and capital budget. I want to just say a couple things about where we are with the budget, and then I'm going to turn it over. So you get ready, okay? Okay, so a couple things I just want to highlight because I think I know I'm proud of it. We had some goals going into this budget cycle, and one of the first goals was we wanted to at least maintain or lower our existing assessments. That's one thing we heard loud and clear from the community is we're going in the wrong trend with our assessments, and so we definitely wanted to lower or at least keep them at least steady. So if you saw in Kate's goals, we asked her to reduce some operating costs. And she has done that. We also asked for some non-assessment revenues to be increased. We've done that. We've also looked at, as we've said in other board meetings, we were looking at some of our staffing costs. We were looking at some of our legal services costs, and obviously some just administrative overhead costs. And we've done all that. And to date, as we sit here today with the budget we have in front of us, this is the first time in Reston Association history that we will be lowering assessments. I can't see that anything will happen between now and by the time we finish this budget that will not still happen. So I'm pretty confident to say that we will lower assessments. As we stand today, with an assessment, a proposed assessment of $681, based on the budget based on our assessment of last year of $692, we've lowered it by about 5%. But I also wanted to remind the community that last year's budget was kind of bought down. That's the term I use when we do something. We bought it down with surplus funds from an operating budget of $720. So if we brought that all the way down to our $681, we'll be lowering assessments by almost $40, by $39. And again, first time in Reston Association history that's ever happened. And I think this board and I think the staff should be are proud of that, and hopefully the community is happy with that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn over all the number stuff because I just like the big fancy numbers. You can get our treasurer.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So we have gone through the budget meetings itself a few different times now. We had a public meeting, I guess it was September 14th. We've had the board public meetings on the budget as well. So I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but I do want to, the last time we presented, it was an overall budget of 18 million in terms of revenues, and expense was about 15.1 million is what the first draft budget had proposed, and we are not substantially different from what was presented then. The one thing that I wanted to go into before maybe we can turn to member comments or actually questions, if you have any questions we can address that, was the previous budget that was presented September 14th, 18th, as well as August 14th, had a $678 per household assessment. Now it's moved up marginally. We've made substantial adjustments based upon the board guidance on September 18th when we had a full work session. Some of the changes, we have changed the pool schedule. We've brought back the hours, the number of days as well. We brought that back up, and so as a result of that, the cost has gone up by $2.88 on a per unit basis. The board did decide to pay down the lake house loan, pay off the lake house loan beginning of December, end of December 2017, which will essentially result in a saving of about $8.66 on a per household basis, on a per member household basis. The board also decided to step up the litter pickup activity, which pushed up the cost by about 2.36 per household assessment. And then the covenants enforcement, we agreed to, as a board, agreed to hire one more person to bring on board, and that pushed up the cost by $2.65. And then we changed how the lake house itself operations are going to look like. Earlier, we had a mix of, after-school programming as well as some rental programming, but we decided that it, from an economic perspective, it made a lot more sense for us to focus more on the rental side. And so as a result of that, we've been able to, that would have a net effect of reducing the assessments by $6.17. There are some other changes as well that we had. There are various staffing adjustments that were made from a benefits perspective, 401k changing, more participation 401k wise, more people projected to electing medical coverage, which pushed up the cost a little bit, one or two additional hires and adjustments. All of that, altogether pushed up the cost by another $10, approximately $11, which is what led to this 681 number. So that's the summary, where we were at 678 September 14th and September 18th work session. Based upon the guidance, now it's up to $681 on a per household basis. So that's the summary. If anybody has any questions, happy to address that.
We have to go into the motions. We have
Okay.
the budget decisions we have to address.
Okay.
So the first one is the audit process.
Yeah, we're going to that now? Any question from anybody? Do we have?
This is a public hearing, don't
Yeah, this is a public hearing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But did you want
So
to
which
cover
is-
those first or no?
No, I think why don't we take the questions, the budget questions, then I'll go into that.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions or comments, yes, sir.
Good evening. John Farrell, President, Colonial Oaks Cluster Association. There's been extensive conversation among some of us regarding the efficacy of paying off the Lake House loan. One of the questions was, well, if we took that money and invested, what could we earn? I asked somebody who's related to me, who was involved in commercial mortgage-backed securities, 2.28% to 3.28%, with a very high level of risk involved. We're much better off paying off this loan, and I support your decision to do that. It's better to restore our capital capacity and to fundamentally put that boondoggle behind us as fast as possible. And so I support the budget that includes that, and my cluster members will be happy to have the reduction in their assessments.
Thank you.
On the other hand, I oppose the adoption, the hiring of a DRB person, not so much for the cost, but for the ineffective work program. The idea of having somebody who wasn't involved in the DRB consideration of the application, taking up the inspection to see that the application was properly implemented, is inefficient in the extreme. You're going to have two different people, one who worked the DRB process and some other person involved in inspecting that. That doesn't work. If I've had to interact with DRB staff and covenant staff on a regular basis, because our cluster is 35 years old. If I had to have two different people to work with we put in a shed so we could have a snow blower, because most of us are kind of old and shoveling snow is a threat to our health now. So we put in a shed, had a snow blower. I would not want to have had to deal with two different people, one to get it approved and the other one to tell me whether or not I did it right. That's a bad idea. That's a way to increase work. and also to increase the aggravation to the members. So I would hope you would not fund that position and seriously look at rearranging the workflow within the DRB Covenant staff, because since you've made a recent change in the leadership of that, it's fallen down. It's really bad. And I think I've shared some stories with some of you about that. That there needs to be some really radical change with the way that thing is working. It's gone backwards since Barbara Ramey left. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other member comment on the budget? Tammy?
Yes.
I hadn't, Tammy Petrine, 2503 Foxcroft Way. I hadn't planned to comment, but I want to follow up on John Farrell. I hate that sheriff idea too, that covenants person going around checking. It's not necessary. I know you've already voted it. I suggest that if you can't get out of it, next time a person leaves covenants, you know, shuffle that around. The idea that RA is has such a long lead to get projects approved because the staff is so stressed, then we're going to have a sheriff coming around and checking if we did it right. You're going to catch that by neighbors' complaints or when sales are done. And I really don't see the need to have that niggling negativity come back on RA when we're trying to build up people's feeling about the organization. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy.
Any other comment?
Okay.
Okay.
So I go on to the next item?
Sure.
Okay, the next item on business process audit. So I want to make some introductory comments on this item, and then if you have any questions or comments, we can go into that. Many of you may recall that besides establishing internal controls, policies, and procedures, I have talked during several public meetings about the need for performing regular external audit of those controls and processes. So not only we establish it, but we also go back and check them. As I've mentioned, I'm deeply involved in the establishment of such controls, policies, and procedures. I initiated the request many weeks back. Initiated a request for a biennial independent audit to make sure that RA is following those policies and procedures with the right checks and balances, and report back to the board as well as the members. Based upon my request, the staff has prepared this initial estimate of $60,000 to perform such an audit. If implemented, this independent audit would, among others, test the effectiveness of the policies being followed, identify deficiencies, and potential inaccuracies as a result. This would be performed by sample testing of the processes. Depending upon the size of the sample of all the transactions and processes that would need to be tested across 2 years, it could be a substantial amount of work. An obvious thought that may arise is that the fiscal committee and I, in my capacity as treasurer and my background, could perform this as volunteers if we can find the time. I am going to explore the potential for that. However, from a public perspective, an independent external audit of our controls and processes may inspire more confidence. Some other things to consider would be, this could be a substantial amount of work if done in a proper way, and it is not a guarantee that a treasurer or fiscal committee member may have requisite time and skill sets to perform such an audit effectively. So my goal today to my colleagues on the board is for us to approve an independent audit process so that the requirement is established as a first step. Secondly, that there be a mechanism to follow this process routinely, this independent process, audit process routinely, and this not be dependent on any potential lack of volunteer willingness and ability to perform such rigorous testing. Through appropriate scoping, the cost of such an audit may be limited to well below $60,000. So that's something that we really need to check, and I intend to do that. But whatever the cost is, every 2 years, I believe that it is money well spent to make sure that RA is doing the right thing and is inspiring confidence with the members, especially some of the recent history that we've had. I would like for us as a board to consider a motion to approve a biennial external audit in principle, but maybe leave out the dollar number limit today. I think the scope can and should be defined next year once we have rolled out all the policies and procedures, and it's been internalized in the organization. And at that point, the board can direct me, the treasurer, as well as the staff to get some proposals, come back with a concrete estimate. In my recent request, I also had a second request for establishing a mechanism for, whistleblower process. So for people to call in if they want to, provide some feedback, make any, petitions for them to do it anonymously. This is standard practice in public companies and many other organizations. And I would also like to propose a second motion to establish a whistleblower mechanism. In fact, that costs so little that we can even do it this year.
What kind of
Whistleblower. So basically, somebody has a petition, has a complaint, they can, they can pick up the phone and leave a message on that number, and that will go to a, agreed to group of people, and who can then, evaluate the merits of that and then take the follow-on steps.
That would not include, we currently have a covenants piece where members feel that there's a violation by, and
this is more
and that is
operational.
not,
This is more operational, financial,
That is
those
not,
kinds of things, yeah.
This is more like a standard business,
Yes,
standard
business-
corporate
business
whistleblower.
I just wanted to
policy.
make sure that we were not,
different.
you were not suggesting that we change our current policy on covenants
No,
violations.
no, this is different. This is business and
This
financial
is how the
operations.
business runs as opposed to a function of what the business does. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So, and it costs very little money to set something like this up, and I'm sure Kate or Robert can give you a number. I think they may have done the analysis already, but I'm speaking from past experience. It costs next to nothing to set this up. And so I would suggest that we do this even by the end of the year, so that, beginning of the year, it's up and running and people are trained and are aware of it. So that would be my second motion for today. So first motion is to, in principle, agree upon having an external audit done every 2 years, and that the board will direct us, me and the staff in the beginning of the year, probably February, to go back and get some proposals and come back with a concrete estimate. The second one would be to, immediately examine a whistleblower,
Can we
process
do
to
them
be
as
set
two
up.
separate items?
Two separate items, yes.
Second
please.
the first.
Thank you.
So the first one was really long.
No, that I was giving the background. So the first motion is the board establishes an external audit process to be performed on the internal controls, policies, and procedures of Reston Association every 2 years.
David had a second to that.
Yep.
Any more
At
discussion?
least
I would like to discuss them.
Any more discussion?
At least.
First of all, I want to thank Shridhar because I know how hard he's been working on this for months. And I certainly support an external financial audit of our controls this coming year. I think it's important as we try to implement the controls after the Stone Turn report. What I'm less clear on is whether we would need to expend that same amount every 2 years. And I simply don't know enough about it to know that. So I would almost, in my mind, the first, I think, is an extraordinarily good investment, namely for this coming year. I'm not sure in the following years. And as to your second motion, I would second that. Well, I guess we should stay with the first one first. So I would ask Kate, and through her ask Rob, whether what position they have on this recommendation for an external financial audit of our controls.
I think it's an excellent idea. I said the same to the fiscal committee earlier this week. I think it is important to keep us fresh in new business processes, to be able to do that and make sure that how we're conducting business is the proper way of doing it. I think it's imperative after what we have been through in the past to put that in place. So I'm in full support of the conduct of such.
So on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely.
And if can I address that point that you raised? The reason to do it regularly, first of all, this type of a process implementation typically makes an organization extremely effective. In the long run, it saves money. It saves, basically wastage, right? You reduce the wastage that you typically have. Makes the whole thing, from a customer perspective, member perspective, a lot more efficient. So it's a good practice to do this. Most organizations tend to do this, especially public companies and those that, have external investors involved. They would want something like this. And for us, our shareholders are the members, right? And so if we did that, I think it inspires a lot of confidence. So one, you should also do it at least every 2 years, even though we don't have a statutory requirement to do this and report to an SEC or somebody, because unless you do it routinely, right, things could slip. People could, things could, just not intentionally, but people may not follow the process. And unless you identify, remediate, things also evolve, right? Something that worked 2 years, right now, may not work 6 years from now because technology has changed. Something else has evolved. So going back to it routinely, checking the process, identifying the risk, putting in place mitigation strategies, I think it's very important. So this is, very little money, I would say, and it's money well spent.
Julie?
I like the idea of doing this with our board members having 3-year cycles.
Yeah.
And with our budget being in 2-year cycles. If we begin this audit next year, it will be in between budget cycles.
Yes, that's
And,
right.
and I think that as we do it, we will become even better.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I look at it go, having been, I'm in my 3rd year, and there's so much that I know now that I didn't know when I began. And if we had these processes in place, this audit, there wouldn't be like a discovery for me of where things might be better performed, where things might be broken. So I think that this is a great idea. I like the fact that you're offering it in principle so that we can go ahead and get a handle on how we should best do it next year.
Yeah.
I don't think we should assign $1 to it yet.
Yeah.
But I think in principle, it's a great idea.
One quick follow-up.
Yes.
To what extent could this audit of controls become part of the work plan for our regular auditor? Or is there a benefit, do you see a benefit in having a different auditor doing it? If we did it with our regular auditor, which I get, we review that periodically anyway, so we could always, we may have planned turnovers in our auditors.
Right.
But would we possibly save money by using the same firm to do both the audit of our financial statements and audit of our controls? Because they already do, they already audit some of our controls.
We could, but to take your first question on that, yes, it does make things a lot better for them as well, because if they are the ones testing the cycles, and if they are part of if they have signed off on the initial implementation in terms of processes, the policies and procedures, they are in a much better position to actually when they review the financial statements from an audit perspective, not from an internal control perspective, they already have a lot of the pieces, the components of it. So it is actually more effective. They can actually assert from an accuracy standpoint, it'll be a lot more accurate from their perspective as well. So
there's less gaming for business between two competing firms, I would imagine.
But there is also value to have someone else from outside do that.
Right.
Because that, I think, ultimately your saving is going to come from, is it going to be your big 4 firm or is it some smaller firm, right? What is the activity? What is the scope of the activities that the cycles that they're actually testing, right? How much of, you saw accounts receivable, accounts payable, those kinds of things, right? How much of it are they going to check? What sizes of the transactions? What are the nature of the processes that they're going to check each and every year?
So
I think ultimately that drives the cost.
If I could just pull us out of the weeds a little bit, we're only looking at principle of doing
Right.
this.
Right.
So
Right. We
in
don't have-
principle, do we as a board agree that we should be doing this every 2 years as a matter of business operations? John, you had one.
Well, that was what I was going to say. I mean, what we're talking about is doing it every 2 years. My question to Streeter was, are you anticipating we will solicit bids every 2 years?
Yep.
Because the scope may change
Yep.
every 2 years, and therefore, if the regular auditor wants the work, they'll come in with a
Right.
good response and a good price.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yep, yeah.
Call
So the
question.
motion on the table was, did you capture all that, Kate?
Let me see if I captured
Yes,
the essence
okay.
of it correctly, and make a suggestion so it can come back. Move to approve the principle of establishing an external business process audit to be conducted biannually.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you want to add a little something so that there's a timeline for bringing that back.
Okay, I wanted that to come back by February, latest February, once the policies, procedures have been implemented, for
By March
the
1st.
board to
By March 1st?
by the February board meeting, basically.
What do you want brought back, bids or cost, or what do you
No,
want brought?
to direct me,
Oh.
the treasurer as well as the staff, to go out and solicit proposals based on a scope. So by February, we can give you a
You
scope.
want the board to make a decision in the February meeting on the plan on how to execute it.
Yep, follow, yep.
And I don't think it's a principle. I think we will do it.
We will do it, yeah, yeah.
Council's asking, how do you fund it? What I'm hearing right now is there's no funding there. It's just coming up with a plan in order, this is what we will be doing. Here's the scope of work that we'll be bidding out for. This is what you're looking for in February 2018.
Do we
But
need
setting
to add
aside-
that to the budget?
Yes.
Do we need to add that now for next year's budget?
I think it's okay to come back with having it scoped out and come back to the board at that time and ask
We
for
can approve
permission
it.
to use surplus cash.
Surplus
or reserve
cash,
it
exactly.
in the existing
Yeah.
budget to do.
Yep.
Right.
Because again, you can, based on the sample testing, you can limit the amount of money that you would spend.
Right.
So Kate, one more time once you're done typing, on the motion.
Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay. Move to approve, I'm going to pick up what John said, establishing
Mhm.
an external business process audit to be conducted biannually and direct the treasurer to work with staff to draft a scope of work for consideration by the board in February 2018.
Yep, good.
You still good with your second?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and you had a second motion.
The second motion was on establishing a whistleblower mechanism and process, and directing the staff to establish it by the end of the year.
Specifically,
Specifically.
financial,
It's
Business
on
operations.
Reston Association operations, financial and business operations.
Second.
Discussion.
Any discussion?
I would like to see it flushed out further before I feel we can vote on it. To just come tonight and say we want a whistleblower policy, I would like to see a little bit more of a definition of it than what I've got tonight.
Can it take the
Come
form
back in
of-
November, and I'll be happy.
Okay.
But I don't,
That's-
I think it's too
if
open,
we
wide open.
have this motion,
Right.
and perhaps a friendly amendment with a policy to implement it to be approved by the board
Right.
at a subsequent date before implementation.
Yeah, so you can direct the treasurer and the staff to come back in November with a view to establishing a whistleblower process and, mechanism by the end of this year.
Which would include more of the specifics related to the
Yeah,
whistleblower.
exactly, yeah.
So it's one thing to say it's a standard business whistleblower
The
policy.
easiest would be to simply have a fully, addressed motion come back in November. But if all you wish to do is direct staff to bring back a recommendation for us, looking at other organizations and the policies that they've used, then I'm okay with
asking for that direction to be taken.
Here's how I understand Sridar's concerns. He has taken, in a very personal way, the burden of implementing, making sure that the stone turn recommendations are approved and implemented. And this is one of the building blocks for that. And he had hoped to get it all established by the end of this year. This at least establishes the principle of doing it.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm not
It
opposed-
it costs very little and easy to implement.
I'm not
That's the reason why.
opposed to the principle. I just don't feel I have enough to vote on establishing a policy. I'm okay with asking that we ask Kate and staff to come back to us in November with bringing forth a policy for me to look at and to vote on. But I think right now it's too unspecific, too general.
So Kate, what's the motion on the table at this point?
I haven't heard a second. I only John did. Okay, so let me just capture that. Okay. So what I have is move to direct the treasurer in coordination with staff to establish by the end of 2017 a whistleblower mechanism and related policy for operational and financial matters.
Yep, for operational and financial matters, and maybe we can add.
No, because it doesn't have me voting on it.
Yeah.
So I can't support.
Can I add to that? So
Your motion.
So in no, I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry. So maybe what you can add to that is in November, for the November board meeting, the treasurer and the staff will report back to the board with an implementation plan as well as a cost estimate for.
What about proposing?
It's a policy as well.
Whistleblower policy.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Propose.
Yes.
That's what
I'm asking for.
I want to make sure I captured it correctly.
Propose-
Lots of voices, and I want to make sure good listener. Okay.
Propose a whistleblower policy
What are we doing in November?
that we will come back and report to the board. Report to the board. present
We'll
to the
include
board.
the policy,
A policy, propose a policy. an
policy, implementation,
plan,
and cost. Yeah?
As well as the cost to implement. As well as the cost to implement.
This got really confusing.
Okay, we're good. Second.
No, I mean, just I don't know where we are with.
Well, you need a plan, you need to implement it, and you need to pay for it. That's what she's getting at.
So I seconded,
Yes, yeah.
I agree with the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'll vote on it.
Wait till she's done typing, and then we'll let her read the motion. No, it just got.
Bear with me as I clean it up just a little bit. Let's see.
Saying I move this.
Almost got it. Bear with me.
Sherry, might I make a side comment that has nothing to do, I filled the time with a few. In my mail today, I received at my Reston address a flyer from Herndon Parks and Recreation, programs and events for active adults.
I got one too. Yeah.
You got one too?
You're poaching our members.
I know. No, but I get.
I know that our
something from
tennis
every
community
month.
goes over to Herndon to play indoor tennis.
but I thought it quite amazing that I would be being solicited by our fellow neighbors in Herndon to come use their parks and recreation facilities. So,
Sorry.
And I apologize. Thank you for bearing with me.
okay.
Not as clean and crisp as I'd like it. Let me give this a go. Direct treasurer in coordination with staff to come back to the board at its November 17 meeting with a draft whistleblower mechanism and related policy for operational and financial matters, as well as implementation costs to be in place by the end of 2017.
I'll second that, or I'll move that, or I guess you've moved it.
Still
okay.
makes your second.
And I'm the seconder, and I accept that as an amendment.
So friendly amendment. If everybody's friendly, I don't have to capture all those.
We're
We're good.
all friendly. Any more discussion? We can take a vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Pass.
You've got 3 more motions?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
No.
Keep going.
Is it the 17th or 16th?
Oh, it's the
They're all in the
16th.
budget.
16th, isn't it?
So the next topic on our budget,
I apologize.
27.
By the November 20, I apologize, Sherry. John was asking when I'd be coming back with it. I'd be happy to make sure I say by the November 16, 2017 board meeting. Does that help?
I don't
Yeah.
think it's my,
Okay.
is it my motion, I guess?
Yeah, it's all you.
Yeah, okay.
so the next decision point would be North Hills Tennis Court capital
Yeah,
projects. So we have a motion in our packet that we can make the motion to put it on the table.
I would like to make that motion.
okay.
I would like to just make a slightly different motion. So here's my motion. Move to include the 2018 capital projects list, the following project related to the repair and improvement of North Hills tennis courts to be completed under the new internal control protocols, same as it was. I just want to add the phrase, to follow the new internal protocols, just to continue to emphasize that we have new internal processes that we must follow, which
Will be
includes,
subject to that, yeah.
yeah, which includes the changes in how we handle contracts over certain amounts of dollars and those types of things.
20
I just,
and 50,000.
for at least for the time being, I'd like to include those words in all of our kind of motions, just to continue to emphasize that, not that Robert needs us to emphasize to him or Garrett anymore, but to continue to emphasize we have new processes in place. So
I accept that friendly.
Forgive me for asking, who seconded that motion?
I'm waiting for a second.
Second.
So discussion,
Discussion, not.
Victoria.
So I want to make sure that we had previously said that we weren't going to add any new projects until the ones currently slated had been fully approved, budgeted, and basically beyond the horizon, and that is not the case at this moment. However, I recognize that some of these things may need to be done. So my big question is, has Covenants gone out and inspected this facility, and if so, what was their report?
Garrett?
No, they have not.
I suggest that we have that done to make sure that we don't have anything else that pops out that needs to be done that is not budgeted for.
Wouldn't that be part of those internal controls?
I don't think that's more the
wasn't
internal
part
controls,
of
more on the
the-
financial side.
Yeah.
Procurement.
This is an
You don't
oopsie we
want-
found in
you
dealing
don't
with the pony barn.
Yeah, you don't want another pony barn.
Yeah.
I recognize that.
I mean, we're dealing with enough trying to get that sorted, and what I'm trying to get across is that I don't, in theory, object to this going into the budget, but there are two.
Where we don't want to lose is
Was
the
that we
pony.
had discussed that we weren't going to be adding any new things to the budget unless it absolutely positively had to be done until anything that had been lagging in our workflow had been sorted. And Pony Barn's not sorted yet. And I just think it goes again to the challenge in how we operate. And we're looking at the next new shiny thing without dealing with the mess that we've got to finalize. and a facility that has significant covenants violations, we need to get that sorted. And what I don't want to have happen is that we approve this, that gets done, and again, Pony Barn's back by the wayside.
But I thought we already have funded, or we have money set aside. How
we didn't release the cash, and we rejected it the last go around, which was fair enough, but the cash hasn't been released, and until that cash is released,
We're waiting.
I just have a general objection, and that's, you guys may not have that objection, but it's just a general objection I have. I just wanted to be clear that it has nothing to do with tennis. It has nothing to do with North Hills. It has everything to do with how we've operated in the past and the changes that I think we need to make going forward.
Okay, noted. John, you had your...
Yeah, I need Sridhar to give me and the folks in the audience who might be watching a remedial. There's a statement in our packet that says, return of these projects will not impact the reserve appropriation or the annual assessment. And I'm just kind of going, how can that be?
I didn't draft that, but I can explain that.
Okay.
Because this is coming out of the RRF fund, we are allocating money going forward, and please, Kate, Robert, jump in, on a 10-year estimate. So what is it that is going to...
Okay, I got it.
Right? So it's not a cash drain out of the
Got it.
assessment itself.
Okay.
It's coming from the RRF fund. Yeah. Okay.
So,
And I share Victoria's concern about process.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. Kate, you want to read the motion? Ish.
Yeah, no, definitely. Move to include in the 2018 capital projects list the following projects related to the repair and improvement of the North Hills tennis courts to follow the new internal controls process at a cost not to exceed $259,000. Resurfacing clay courts, replacing court lights, replacing fencing, no bathroom access.
What was the dollar amount you said?
$295,000.
294, yeah.
Right.
So we had a second. Are we prepared to go to a vote?
Mhm.
So all those in favor of the motion as read?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Okay, Butler Pond Dam.
Yes. Butler Pond, okay. So move to include in the 2018 capital projects list the state required tree removal on Butler Pond Dam.
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
So I just learned that the state had come out and did an inspection of this dam and identified, we had, Kate, just correct me if I'm wrong, about 100 maybe plus trees that have to come off that dam, and it's not a choice. We have to do it, and it's not like little baby trees. These are like big trees. So, yeah, so it's sort of like...
So does that mean there's going to be a feeding frenzy among the members for firewood?
Well, maybe if they want to come out with their... No, I can't say that.
Sell it.
So we have a motion on the table. If there's any more discussion?
See whether we can sell the fire.
Nope, let's go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Okay, next motion. Move to direct staff to include in its draft 2018 operating and capital budgets an appropriation of $2.99 million to the Repair and Replacement Reserve Fund in accordance with Assessment and Finance Resolution 3, thereby increasing the proposed 2018 annual assessment by 49 cents.
Second.
Approximately. Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Land use.
Bathroom break? You need a bath? Yeah, I could use a... Do you want to keep running?
Yeah, I'll keep going.
So,
Next on the agenda is the
just take a break if you need to.
land use updates and board discussion of the PRC ordinance amendment matter and the comprehensive plan amendment dealing with building repurposing and the Reston Town Center North. And we have John McBride and Larry Butler.
Missed this part. I guess I'll hold it.
These people talk.
Oh, jeez.
We might need a minute on this one because this one came out this afternoon.
Oh, we'll have it in a second.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. I failed to let some members talk that registered to talk for that item.
Well, I'm one of them, but was that item passed?
Yes,
Okay, I didn't quite.
Which item?
North Hills.
The North Hills?
North Hills tennis.
It passed. It passed.
It passed.
It passed to go into the budget.
Okay, passed it to the budget just as it is.
Yep. Okay.
So for those of you that had signed up, if you still want to speak, so it was Rod, Howard, Leslie, Susan, Elliot, and another Susan, same Susan. Anybody of any of those folks want to speak? Okay, then we'll go ahead and move on. Sorry about that, but it looks like it turned out okay anyway. So I'm going to run to the restroom.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
And we
All
will
right.
need to pause at this moment in time
So
just until we have.
Why don't we
I'll
take,
stay.
Why don't we take 5 minutes?
Because it won't ever
No,
be
no,
5
no,
minutes.
It'll never
Okay.
be that long.
All
Let's
right.
get going.
I'll wait to keep quorum.
Okay.
Okay, where are we? Oh, land use updates.
Yep.
So we're up for John, right?
Good evening, board members, Madam President. I think the first item on our agenda is the PRC zoning ordinance amendment. As you will recall, as far back as May, this board went on record as not supporting the county's proposal. I think both the community, your staff, and myself are in agreement that we have heard nothing since that time to change that opinion. So we recommend that this board communicate to the county through Supervisor Hudgens that it cannot support the PRC zoning ordinance amendment. There was certainly nothing in Monday's meeting that would change that opinion. In fact, I think it probably reinforced that opinion. We've had conversations with your staff and with members of RCA, RCA 2020, and others. And what we've come up with was a recommendation that's really from all of those groups that says in a letter to Supervisor Hudgens, which I think is before you and has been drafted by you, not by me, that says we don't support the PRC zoning ordinance amendments. And in fact, there are some things in the Reston Master Plan, some discrete things that we will identify at next board meeting, November 16th, for your review and the community's review, that we specifically request that the county review, study, and fix. Very similar to what they did at Tyson's. Tyson's Corner had some issues in its infancy on the new master plan for Tyson's, and there were very discrete reviews, plan amendments, studies that were done to fix those problems. So that is what I think the community, your staff, and certainly I recommend is the best way forward at this point.
Would it be useful, I'm going to go to you, David, to read the letter that we're proposing for a matter of record? I mean, I can read it.
I think so.
Yeah. I think it's not my signature.
Yeah, yeah.
So, just for the record, we're proposing to directors, because I know this just came out today. This afternoon. If it's okay, I'll just read the letter so we can all hear it and then we can have a discussion on it, if I can see. So it's going directly to Supervisor Hudgens. On behalf of the Reston Association Board of Directors, I would like to thank you for encouraging Fairfax County staff to respond to the association's request of May 25, 2017 for additional information related to the proposed Reston PRC zoning ordinance amendment and for holding another community meeting. Both were crucial in order for the Reston Association Board to reach an informed decision regarding whether or not to support the amendment proposed by county staff. The community meeting held at South Lakes High School on October 23, 2017, with well over 900 in attendance, was informative. Based on both the county staff panel discussion and the community comment, the Reston Association Board of Directors cannot support the county's the county staff's proposed PRC District Residential Density Zoning Ordinance Amendment, and that sentence is underlined. However, the Reston Association Board acknowledges and greatly appreciates your willingness, as stated at the conclusion of the community meeting on October 23rd, to initiate a review of certain elements of the Reston Master Plan portion of the comprehensive plan. Accordingly, the association respectfully requests that the county defer further consideration of the proposed PRC amendment until certain elements of the Reston Master Plan portion of the comprehensive plan can be reviewed. Next month, the association will provide you with a detailed outline of the important areas the Reston community believes needs to be reviewed in the Reston Master Plan before the PRC ordinance matter is again considered by county staff and the Reston community. The sustainability of Reston's unique planned community structure is everyone's goal. Because we share this common goal, I am confident we can work together to attain it. The association has recently been informed that Mr. Frank Delafay will not be seeking reappointment to his position as the Hunter Mill District Representative on the Fairfax County Planning Commission when his term ends in December 2017. Reston Association is interested in actively participating in any event that thanks him for his selfless and devoted service. Further, we are interested in learning what the recruitment and appointment process will be to fill this vacancy, specifically how Reston and other parts of the Hunter Mill District be able to participate in this process. How we will be able to participate in this process. The Reston Association Board of Directors would like to work collaboratively with you and the county staff on important matters regarding Reston's future. Your favorable reply to this request is eagerly awaited by the Reston Association and its members. We look forward to hearing back from you. Soon on next steps. Sincerely, with my signature. So directors, we're actually voting on whether you give me permission to sign this letter and send it to the county. John, I know you had listed you wanted to speak to.
Well, before John speaks, let me just make a motion.
Okay.
That we authorize and encourage you to send the letter as drafted.
Second.
And then we let John speak?
Yep.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. John Farrell, Colonial Oaks Cluster President. On the PRC, I actually came tonight to speak to the repurposing building motion, but on the PRC, let me just say a couple of things. Since the meeting on Monday night, I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Highland of the county staff to try and understand what's pushing this. Why now? And he was kind enough to tell me that there are 4 applications, totaling 82 acres, in PRC that are proposed to be brought forward, and if the PRC isn't amended, there'll be PRM, which is a different district. The net result of that would be a reduction of about 1,100 in the PRC cap. That's what's driving this. At the end of the day, who cares? Who cares? If we only are losing 1,100 out of 7,700 gap in our cap, so what? Doesn't justify the rush to authorize and incentivize our grocery stores to be eliminated to build luxury high-rise housing. It's reckless. As Mr. Bob Zine will well aware, our Supreme Court said about comprehensive plans, they are, in the Lerner decision, but a guide. I would add they are not a suicide pact. It seems to me that your letter, while I applauded it, is too soft. You say you do not support. Please change that to you oppose. There's no reason to be wishy-washy with that language. You oppose this PRC amendment. You can't support it. You can't say that we ought to eliminate 3 grocery stores and that we ought to incentivize the owners of those shopping centers to neglect those facilities in the hopes of putting in 15 and 30-story high-rise apartment houses in their place in the middle of what, in all cases, is a townhouse community and low-rise condominiums. Seriously? Does anybody with good faith say to the Reston community that's what ought to happen at our 3 village centers? So I would suggest that you be a little bit stronger in your language and make it clear that you oppose this. I also would strongly suggest that this letter be widely circulated in the community and that you encourage the RA membership to make contact with our supervisor's office to let them know that they stand with the RA board in opposing this amendment. The planning commission, the comprehensive plan can be opened any time. It has to be reviewed by state law every 5 years. Now, Fairfax County recognizes in the breach that 5-year review requirement. It can be reopened, and you should in November ask that the comprehensive plan be reopened so that this mistake regarding the village centers can be corrected as well as some others. One important one that came up in the Reston National Golf Course case is there are some attorneys, particularly the attorney for Lerner, who took the position that the PRC plan is an administrative act. And David can tell you how important that not be the case, because an administrative act means that the development is by right and doesn't require a legislative review, a planning commission hearing, and board of supervisors hearing, but it's a right instead of a legislative discretionary matter. That language has to be fixed in the PRC ordinance so that there is no longer an ambiguity that Mr. McDermott was able to identify, so that it is absolutely clear that a PRC plan is a legislative act with the full discretion of the governing body. So those are the things I hope you accomplish, but this letter needs a little backbone. Thank you.
John. Just state your name, please, and your address. And
Melissa Helmick at 11611 Auburn Grove Court in Reston. I attended the meet. First, I want to thank you all for your service, and especially those who volunteer here. We really appreciate your time. I did attend the Monday meeting, had a lot of conversations with people, and two things stood out for me. One was someone was just trying to ask, could we just hold off a moment on all of these projects and everything and have a conversation and stop and think about how we're going to do it, such as transportation, schools, house values, everything. And they used the word moratorium, and Mrs. Hudgens said no, absolutely not. So my concern is that there's not a willingness to maybe sit back and really think through all of this, that there's more of an eagerness to have the development come in, and there's a lot of incentives for that. After the program, I spoke to somebody, and especially I'm concerned about the village centers. I didn't quite understand what it meant, understand now. It can be that they have high-rises with retail underneath. I can walk to the North Point Shopping Center, so that's of grave concern to me. And I asked her, if people totally oppose this, do we have any say in the matter? And she hesitated and smiled at me. And she went on to say, oh, but there'll be a high-rise, but there'll be all retail on the bottom. And I said, I don't want a high-rise that I can walk to in my own neighborhood. So my reason for getting up tonight is just to say that we are so reliant upon you. I know it's Fairfax County that gets to ultimately, at least that's what she told me, at least gets to have the ultimate say. But we are so reliant upon you, our homeowners association, to support us in what you're hearing from all of us and to do what you can do. And I really appreciate that, because I, as one person, or maybe so many of us, I don't know how much power we have to say that, but this is our home. We bought it where there weren't high-rises, and now, because maybe it's more money for Fairfax County, they're going to put those in, but say that we have retail underneath a high-rise. So I really appreciate anything you can do to help us and the multitude of people that are expressing their opinions. Thank you very much.
I just want to say one thing to your comment, that, Reston Association, as you heard from the letter that we're proposing, and hence making it a little bit stronger, and the board meeting last month where every board member talked about their own individual thoughts about this whole PRC amendment. We are strong. We do feel like we will take a strong position. We do stand with the community. However, the community has to continue to stand. Having 900 plus people at that meeting, if there was only 20 people at that meeting, we wouldn't even be having this conversation tonight. So the community has to continue to stand strong. I don't know how else to say it. You can't rely on this association to be the only voice, because ultimately we're one voice. 900 voices speak a whole lot louder than this group's one voice. But I appreciate what you said, and I certainly appreciate everything everybody's doing. But I just want to reiterate, we can't do it alone either. We need the whole entire community to continue to stand strong. That's my soapbox, and I'll get off of it. But
good point.
Don't get off of it.
no, just for tonight, because I really have to go to the bathroom.
I think Sue wants to
Oh, I'm going to
talk.
do that. If you keep going, David's in charge.
Well, let me just, since Sherry had to leave for a couple minutes, let me just reiterate, the letter is the letter. I'm sure it can be criticized by many that maybe it's not strong enough, but I think that it does get the message across. But more important than the content of the letter is Sherry's, and as John Farrell said, you've got to take that letter. We're going to make it distributed and make it available to all RA members, but the RA members, they are the ones that have to talk not to us, but to their elected official.
It's 10 on the Board of Supervisors, correct?
Yeah, their elected official
It's not
being
just
Kathy
Hunter's-
Hudgens.
Right.
And every other one, but frankly, as John Farrell knows, and others in the room know, the board typically in land use matters will defer to the supervisor in which the matter is located, that is affected most by the matter. In this case, the PRC, which means Reston, which means Kathy Hudgens. And that includes the chairman of the Board of Supervisors as well. So you have to talk to Supervisor Hudgens. Critical.
Can I ask a question? And I'm kind of new to all of this, but I don't know, I hate to do it because you come up to the podium.
David, I'm sorry.
I just have-
Sue Bethel wanted to talk as well.
I just have a question on that I heard a lot about Mrs. Hudgens. And I'm just wondering, and there was a lot of comments and people who have maybe more knowledge, is there somebody else that we can go to that has as much, or is that just the next person we can go to and it just stays with her and she has kind of all the power? I don't know. It's not a personal thing.
No.
I don't know. And
from a civic standpoint, that is exactly how you have to do it. There is no one else you can appeal to in this matter.
The suit, you said.
David, if I may?
Yes.
An anecdote to that very point, for those of you who may or may not know, a few years ago, there was a proposal to redevelop the South Reston Park and Ride, and there was considerable citizen concern about that. And some of us had a meeting with Jerry Connolly, who at the time was the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and he stressed to us that we do not have a single supervisor. We have a supervisor and we have the chairman. So to the point that the other supervisors are going to look to our supervisor, but the chairman has to be considerate also. So I view it as we have two.
Can I make a point?
That's what I do. We have two.
Yeah.
Sharon Bulova.
Sharon Bulova.
Okay, thanks very much. I just want to make a point. The way the politics, I understand this work, if the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, it's very, very difficult for the Board of Supervisors to turn it down, the way these bureaucracies work. I was part of bureaucracy. I know. You know this as well. So it's not only getting to the supervisors, you've got to get to the Planning Commission, and you've got to get to them through Kathy Hudgens. That's what's driving it. And what sort of deal you can, how you convince them not to do this, be creative. But I think John was right. Rather than saying cannot support, I think you should say you oppose it. You have a leadership position. We started this thing, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. Who would have thought we would turn out 900 people on Monday night? But we did it. and we're going to do it again if we have to. And we will follow. We need your leadership. Say we oppose.
Mr. Vice President, I should probably, in the course of this conversation, disclose that I'm a member of Reclaim Reston, which is one of the groups that led the resistance. And I was going to say what Steve said, that in addition to talking to Supervisor Hudgens, it's very important that we talk with the Planning Commissioner, and it doesn't hurt to try to talk to the board chairman, Sharon Bulova. The other thing is the point that Steve Cantor mentioned is actually part of this letter. You'll note that we, and I must say that this was done with considerable input from the same community leaders who helped lead the charge for the 900-person meeting. So it includes an expression of our deep interest in the appointment of the successor commissioner for this district on the Fairfax County Planning Commission. So it recognizes that we want a partner with whom we can whom we can trust and whom we can talk to. So that's already in this letter. As I say, it was indeed a community-wide effort to come up with the points we wanted to make.
So you're back in charge.
You're back in charge. I'd like to make 3 comments on the letter and a question to Mr. McBride.
I thought we were about ready to adjourn. What happened?
We are.
Hot topic.
You fast forwarded and we didn't.
Oh.
Hot topic.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll start with, I'm in favor of the letter. When I read the letter, I had visions of a particular movie where an attorney objected. There was some ruling from the bench, and then she strenuously objected, which didn't serve her cause very well. Okay, I want to make sure we're not strenuously objecting, but we're stating our position. I agree with Mr. Farrell that we need to remind the supervisor that we continue to oppose. I don't like the support word. I agree with oppose. I think we are too weak on the commissioner, the planning commission. Everyone's interested. I think we need to assert standing for our members in participation in that process. Might cause some discomfort, but I think that is stronger than just being interested. And Mr. McBride, in the meeting Monday night, the question was asked, I think it was I don't remember if it was a gentleman or a lady, but the topic was trying to do the math. Maybe it was the physics guy. Trying to do the math on the number of acres and the number of people, and the comment back from the staff, it wasn't Mr. Selden, I think it was the transportation lady, or who basically admitted that we were close in the 3 applications, to Mr. Farrell's point, that 3 applications would put them over. So what is it about those 3 applications, putting them over the current limit, that has the county wanting to move so fast? Are they, is it, we can all have our opinions on whether they want more revenue or they're afraid to be sued, but what is the legal implication to the county, the reason they might feel they have to act so quickly? Is there any?
Well, in the county's opinion, there is. And when you say act quickly, it's kind of a relative term. We have had, remember this was originally on a railroad train already out of the station, and we've kind of blocked that and slowed it down. Staff now will admit that really it's 2018. It's not next month. It's not January. But they do expect, and again, this is them talking, they do expect in 2018 to be on the 4th or 5th application, tying into what John said, he was absolutely correct, to where the application comes in and the cap is still at 13 people per acre. And let's say the application, if it comes in on a property where the current adopted plan, whether the plan is right or wrong, good or bad, it is the adopted plan, says they can have, let's say, 1,000 units, or recommends 1,000 units for that area. And remember, most of these are in the town center area that specifically recommend that. Then you have a situation where that zoning ordinance doesn't implement the plan. So staff has to, you can't use the ordinance because it's not amended. It has a non-waivable requirement that that threshold would be exceeded by that application. So the developer, what they're going to do is, as John said, they are going to change the zoning district. Now, maybe one of those is okay, but when you start doing that, I can tell you the developers don't love this zoning district. They don't like being under a population cap. It's the only zoning district in the county that has that. And remember, there's other things in there. There's not only an overall population cap throughout Reston, there's an overall density per acre for the type housing throughout Reston. And all this revolves around residential applications or mixed use with residential. The other ones really aren't affected. The key issues here for the community and the developer and the county are the residential applications, primarily multifamily near the metros. So what you have is the possibility, and again, this is the county talking, and I think there's some credence to this, that the PRC district unravels when you have more and more of those applications coming in. Because when you take the acreage out, suddenly that changes the whole population per acre. You don't have the 6,245 or whatever the acreage is. In Reston, you have less. If it's a small application and small acreage, as John says, who cares? But if it's more than that and it continues, then I think the county cares. I think Reston should care, because this is what keeps your planned community structure alive, is this direct connection, not a guide, but a direct connection between the recommendations in the plan, which should be specific, and that's part of the problem with the plan, is there's some areas where it's not, and that's some of the things we've talked about recommending to you to ask the county to look at and fix. But that direct connection between those specific recommendations of how many units and the population cap and the type units. Because remember, PRC controls a certain mix. Reston can't have all multifamily, can't have all single family. There is a prescribed mix in that PRC ordinance. So that's the type situation.
Which one wins when you've got 13 per acre and you have these applications that would raise and go above that?
No, what I'm saying is they can't go above that in the PRC district, so they rezone out of the district. They get their rezoning. You have no population cap control over it, so you still get the new units in, which is the problem. So we think
that was actually stated by one of the attorneys at the very first of these meetings, way back when, right?
Yeah, it's no secret. That's the county's position, and in fact, it does have some credence, but it's not a reason to proceed too quickly and to do something which 16 people per acre, again, is not based on that plan. It's the same problem as 13 later. You need to have a direct connection, but you need to have a good plan too, and that's the way forward we're recommending.
Is that the attorneys for some of the developers had stated very publicly you can oppose us all you want, we're going to find a way to get it done anyway.
They did.
Effectively.
They did.
In that
So-
very, very first meeting.
Well, they have to. There's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
money at stake. They're going
Yeah.
to find a way. and
I wanted to make that
is-
clear for anybody who missed that very first meeting back in,
So it's
God
in
knows
our
how long ago it was.
it's in our members' best interest for us to preserve the PRC
Absolutely.
zoning.
Yes.
But is that too much in the weeds to put in this letter? That's in the follow-up for next month?
That's the follow-up next month, yes.
Okay.
Again, we have an opportunity, we think. We have to approach it correctly. And again, who makes decisions on all these zonings? The county and the same supervisor we're trying to influence here.
I think we.
So is that the
Sherry,
statement?
Sue Bethel was trying to do a comment earlier, so if we could.
Yeah, we want to,
Madam President, I'd like to ask Mr. McBride before he
Gets away.
settles into his chair. Do you see any problem with changing "we cannot support" to "we oppose"?
I do not. Actually, the two changes you were talking about, I think the important thing is exactly what has been expressed here. We need to get a message out tonight. We need to have a unified board and community of a certain message. I think the semantics may be important to some and not to others. I will tell you the part of the reason the language "cannot support" is in there is it's our position, it's your senior staff's position, it's been my position representing you that these types of actions that affect only Reston, this zoning ordinance amendment, should not go forward without the support of Reston Association because your members are Reston. So that's why it was stated that way. I have no problem with saying opposed to it. We just need to get something out.
In the letter that we put together, underlined is the statement, which I believe is where we're headed. The association respectfully requests the county defer further consideration of the proposed PRC amendment until certain elements in the Reston master plan portion of the comprehensive plan can be reviewed. And that's exactly what we're asking for, is to address the things where there's, I'll say, holes or...
Yeah, it's asking for a delay not until a time, but until some action.
An event.
We're looking
Which
for
is
the
more
fixes and
important than the passage of
get the
time.
village centers out of this thing.
Kate has a comment.
Yes, it is.
If you wouldn't mind, there are a couple of paragraphs I've made some changes to based on what I've heard, and I want to read those to see if you're comfortable with the changes that I've made.
Kate, sorry, before you do that, is it possible to put that up on the screens at all? Because this came out this afternoon, so members weren't able to see this letter.
And we
I'm
want to
going
hear
to try
from
that.
Sue.
Bear with me just a
Okay.
second. Let me see if
Can
I'm
we hear from Sue
successful.
while she does that?
In the meantime, can I make a comment? I sent an email out to my colleagues on the board this afternoon. I'd definitely like, not just participation in the selection of the Hunter Mill District Commissioner, but actually for any change, anything to be, essentially postponed until this person is selected. That the county should not take any action on the PRC amendment till that we've actually gone through the process and selected the person, and that person is actually
That we
sitting
actually have
in the commission.
actual representation.
Exactly.
That is,
Yeah, exactly. We don't want somebody from outside the Hunter Mill District to be sitting there. We want to be a strong participant in picking that person. So I'd like to introduce that into the letter. The second part that I wanted to understand better was also what are the comp plan changes, the review, elements that we want to review, and what kind of changes are we looking for, what outcomes are we looking for from that. I didn't get a sense of that, but some of you may have that because you've been part of that conversation with different people.
The
But
list
I'd
is
certainly like to
in a
understand.
very early stage of development.
which is why I thought it was important. Let's get the statement out. We've said that there's items. We're working on that. We heard some things from Catherine.
Again, my concern is opening the door to something else. Like we have.
could I just make the motion was that you guys would authorize me to send a letter if, instead of us sitting here wordsmithing a letter as a board, if Kate and I and John, incorporate some of these changes? Is the motion still okay that you authorize?
Well, let me just say this. I don't want there to be, it's important we get this out, get it out immediately.
Right, our voice
I don't
needs to
think
be
we
here
can
now.
have the luxury of talking about the planning commissioner and not taking any action because frankly, he or she will be a member, a citizen of a 100 mil district, but that could be Vienna.
Right.
So, there's only so much control we would have over that.
Right.
And have our comments and our suggestions taken under advisement. So I think that it's important to talk about Frank Delafay and about his tenure and the process of replacing him, but I think for now, we ought to get the letter out, and I don't think we should be talking about more than a couple of changes, so we can do it tonight.
I agree.
Kate?
And Sridhar, in fact, since Mr. Delafay's term ends this December, and they're not going to take even the advertisement up until early 2018, your concern, I think, will be met.
My concern is they'll go with someone that's not, even without a Hunter Mill District Commissioner actually in place.
Let me say this about the Planning Commission. Since I was a member of the Planning Commission representing this district from 1989 to 92.
Okay.
They typically do not advertise. They typically do not have a candidacy process. It's typically the supervisor selects someone, and that's it. And the rest of the board will vote on that. So I don't want us to get up any expectations that are going to be dashed, that anyone is going to have that much input, or that there is actually going to be a candidacy selection process. It may happen that way, but it very likely could go the other way.
Kate?
Larry is helping me to get the information to a place where I can pull it up, that people can look at it. So I'm working on that. I was going to, simple change as we're waiting for that, and when he flags me down, when he's done it, I can put it up on the screen. However, second paragraph, underlined sentence says, based on both the county and staff panel discussions and the community comment, the Reston Association Board of Directors, here's the edit, opposes the county staff's proposed PRC district residential density zoning ordinance amendment. So I have removed the phrase now cannot support. I am, based on, and I apologize because I missed a piece of the conversation, and David, I want to make sure I capture either an edit or not to edit based on what Director Bowman said. I went to the second to last paragraph on the second page, and where it states, where we begin toward the end of the paragraph, further, it states currently, further, we are interested in learning the recruitment process. I have amended it based on what I've heard, and Larry's just come back, and maybe he could help me out by putting it on, grabbing it from, could you put it up on the screen for me as I read? I appreciate that, Larry. Further, we would like to be an integral component of the recruitment and appointment process in filling this vacancy, period. And then I scrapped the last sentence, so it captures the essence. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Fine, yeah.
Yes.
So who made the motion and who seconded it?
I
friendly
captured that
amendment?
earlier this evening, and it was David, seconded by Julie Bitzer. I plan, move to authorize and encourage President Hebert to send the proposed Reston PRC District Residential Density Zoning Ordinance Amendment letter to Supervisor Hudgens and published widely in the community as presented below. I was going to include the entire text. And again, if you'd like, Larry is going to pull it up so that you can see.
What do we need to, do we need to see it? I think everybody agreed.
I think I had just asked for it to be put up for the benefit of the
that's fine.
members.
Okay. But let's go to the vote.
Movement and the seconder both agree with it.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree.
All right.
Yes.
We move to a vote?
Yes.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good.
Okay,
We're
great.
good. You can leave that up there for the, Mary, just leave it up there for people to read.
Why is it so
I think we
Now,
can make it a
building
two-screen
repurposing.
piece if you reduce the size. I can help you with that. Bear with me just a
We-
moment now.
Counselor
Move on.
McBride, next topic.
Yes, ma'am, moving along. We have a PowerPoint, and I should have a clicker.
Uh-oh, he's got a PowerPoint.
Uh-oh.
We're going to be removing this from the screen. Is that acceptable and we'll make
Yes.
it available?
Yes.
Yep.
I just want to make sure, did anybody want to take a quick look at it, or?
We don't have
can
time,
move on?
Victoria. We gotta
That's
go.
right.
Be posted on the RA website.
I appreciate
very
your wanting
Concern,
to
'cause
get.
I didn't even look at it this afternoon, is my concern.
There.
You're okay with it, trust me.
I know I'm okay with it.
Okay, so moving on.
Huh?
You could go print a couple copies if you really wanted to.
I don't even know what this presentation's about.
Okay, onward.
Okay.
That would be good.
Adjourn.
Where are we?
Just-
No, wait, stop.
But he
I
doesn't
want to see
freaking
it.
move.
If I need to kill myself yet.
Here, the third part of that.
Oh, you know, fine.
You ready?
Okay, are we ready,
Mm-hmm.
Madam President?
Yes, sir.
What we're talking about is a proposed countywide comprehensive plan amendment titled Office Building Repurposing. And again, this is not a zoning ordinance. It is an amendment to the countywide policy plan portion of the comprehensive plan. So therefore, it does impact the Reston master plan component of the county's adopted comprehensive plan. This is a green building and sustainable initiatives action by Fairfax County staff and has pretty broad support throughout the county from what I'm told. As I said, this would impact and amend the Reston master plan, so that's why we need to talk about it. Guidelines for office building repurposing are intended to facilitate the conversion of vacant office buildings or light industrial flex located in designated areas, and there's a list of areas countywide. The areas that are relevant for Reston are the TSAs, the transit station areas, and the revitalization district, of which Lake Ann is the only one. So only those two areas are affected in Reston. What it does is it allows in the comprehensive plan alternative land uses not envisioned by the current site-specific recommendations of the plan. And I'll give you an example in a minute as we go through this. So the effect of this is countywide office buildings that are repurposed according to these guidelines will be deemed for those new uses in conformance with the comprehensive plan, despite what a site-specific or local recommendation says. Now, the proposed guidelines deal with only these type of repurposings. Office to light industrial or urban architecture, office to institutional or public facility uses, like to a school or other things, office to retail and other commercial uses, office to indoor rec uses, office to residential uses, which caught our eye, it's highlighted there, office to a mixture of office and live-work units, and office to hotel. Now, obviously, office to residential is of concern and further study. Let's talk about the benefits. Again, this is a green building, a sustainable county initiative. Reusing buildings is more sustainable than demolition and replacement in most areas of the county. It reduces the time frame required to build a dysfunctional building, vacant office building, to market for a more economically viable use. So there's county tax revenues and local economic viability issues here. Indoor recreation, live, work, or hotel uses can revitalize areas and meet local community needs. Again, this is county-wide. There are some areas where this is very important, very helpful, and very useful. Let's look at Reston, and let's focus on conversion to residential uses. This is the transit station areas in Reston. There are 3 of them. They are unusual in that the Master Plan Task Force, right or wrong, extended the 3 transit station areas well beyond what a normal transit station area is, which is about a half mile of a transit station. They extended them for expediency during that process and to make sure that the entire corridor, the Dulles corridor, the Metro Rail corridor, would be replanned as part of that Phase 1 replanning effort. If you look, those white rectangles there are all existing office buildings throughout. So let's scroll down to what's even more important. This is the Reston Master Plan land use plan. Remember, in some instances, the Reston TSAs are drawn to over 1 mile from the transit station stop, and they encompass a large amount of areas highlighted here that are planned only office. So they went through the planning process. A lot of the areas were replanned for mixed use. A lot of the areas were planned for primarily residential use. These areas at the periphery, which really don't have the planning characteristics of a TSA, were planned to remain all office. So what this amendment would do would be to say all of these areas now have an option for development. As long as you keep the existing building and repurpose it, you can repurpose it to all residential. And what gets your attention is there's like 5.8 million square feet of offices in this corridor that could be repurposed. Now, would that happen? No. But we've seen from all the applications that there is an economic appetite for taking out office and putting in residential. Most of the applications we've tracked in the corridor do not inject new residential into office environments. They take out the office and they put virtually all residential. Maybe they have some first floor retail and professional offices, but that's a drop in the bucket. So our fear was, well, maybe it's not a good idea to do this through that countywide process, because in fact, there were very good reasons in the master plan process for Reston in 2014 to keep these office. So here's our concerns. The plan amendment would encourage the potential addition of thousands of new unplanned residential multifamily dwellings in areas now planned for only office. In the Reston planned community, same thing we've said with the PRC ordinance, unplanned and unquantified residential growth disrupts the balance between land use and infrastructure. So what do we mean by that? Well, let's take a look here. These numbers on this chart, these are the 3 TSA areas. The numbers on the chart are the numbers assumed by county staff in the traffic operations analysis that was used to generate the balance, to balance the infrastructure for transportation with the land use. You'll see the areas that we were concerned about that were planned for all office, rightfully so, had 0 dwelling units in that traffic impact analysis, transportation operations analysis. So that's an example of transportation. Schools, parks, everything else are the same way. So that was a concern. Our recommendation was to limit conversions of office to residential uses to buildings only located within 1/2 mile of the Reston metro stations. Those areas are planned mixed use, so residential was anticipated. Or in the alternative, we've discussed with county staff excluding Reston altogether from that office to residential repurposing. Totally. It's not to say that a specific office building, it wouldn't be a good idea to repurpose it to residential. Go through the planning process. Do a plan amendment, go through the analysis of balancing infrastructure to the land use. There is a process, it can be done. That's the way planned communities do it. So we have a proposed motion that is to direct staff in coordination with Land Use Council to work with Fairfax County staff, including testifying either in person or written at the public hearings, to amend the proposed plan amendment to only allow for the conversion of office to residential. That's what concerns us. In buildings located within 1/2 mile of a metro station, or to exclude that repurposing from office to residential altogether in Reston, which might be a better approach. I doubt anything would happen at Lake Ann, and Lake Ann, recall, is replanned for additional residential anyway, so it's not a big concern there. Our concern is unplanned residential growth. I'm happy to say that we've already been talking to county staff about this because, again, that train is well down the tracks. The Planning Commission hearing is next week, the 4th. I think that's next week. So we actually have concurrence by staff that we're correct. That was an oversight, and they are willing to recommend to the Planning Commission, change their recommendation to exclude Reston altogether from the office to residential repurposing. We thought it through. We don't think there's any downside or bad side to that. You can still, on a site-specific basis, go through a planning effort and take the time and do it. We're just very worried about if this goes through the way it is. Be happy to answer any questions.
Couple of questions, John.
You only get one.
So one is, in general, some of these, if we look at this, if they implement it as they proposed, would those areas come under PRC? Any of those, is there a risk of some of these repurposed office buildings falling within the PRC district? That's one question. Second question is, what happens to, along Sunrise Valley Drive, there was API building, there was the Q-Vine building that's being redeveloped into residential. Those are all going to be more than 1/2 mile from a metro station, whether it's Wheelie or this. How does that fit into this?
Okay, let me answer that. Let me do the most recent part of that, the latter part of that. This does not preclude repurposing. If the comprehensive plan already calls for residential or a mixed use with residential, like the API building did, and I believe the other building you're talking about, you can do it. You don't need this provision. What this provision does is take areas like this, where the existing comprehensive plan for that site and that building does not allow residential, does not recommend, is a better word, does not recommend residential. It changes that to where it does. So to answer your question, those conversions could take place irregardless of this amendment and what this amendment says. That's why when we say limited to a half mile of a metro station, it's not a problem because within a half mile of a metro station, we have planned residential areas in there. So maybe it's a good thing for a building to repurpose instead of being torn down.
And then
Not
if it was,
precluding that.
Yeah, and then the first question was about, do any of these fall within the PRC?
Some of them might, most of them are not.
Okay.
The vast majority are not. Actually, I think all of them that we're concerned about that are planned office, I think are not PRC.
Okay. But do we have any risk in terms of, areas within the PRC getting picked up by this if we don't pass this? If the county doesn't agree to this half a mile?
Well, they've already agreed to it, but I don't think it affects any of the PRC. Again, that's another reason to amend it the way we're proposing. But when we looked at it, I don't think any of those are PRC.
Victoria?
So two things. So what you're saying then is that we don't expect that to have any impact on the density conversations we've been having, because this would fall outside of it?
That's correct. And if the board is persuaded by its own staff who's agreed to amend this, we absolutely will not, even if they are PRC.
Okay. And then the other thing is, this effectively blocks these buildings being torn down and replaced by high-rises then, correct?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
No, it's elective. It gives them another option.
So there's not benefit to us, really.
Well,
The only benefit would be if it did block that.
I think for Reston,
Yeah.
with Reston's economy and the placement of these buildings, I don't see a benefit of this ordinance for the residential conversion. There is a benefit for some of
School
these other
conversions,
uses to provide that flexibility in some of these areas to the far east. Right now, they seem to still be leasing pretty well. Hopefully, they'll continue, but who knows?
Okay, thanks.
why would we want to pass something that says within a half mile? Why would we not simply just oppose any change for Reston?
No, we don't. We did. Well, by that you mean putting an exemption for the office to residential for Reston.
There is, you just told me there's a way they can apply and it can be accomplished. So why do I want to?
I'm fine with that. I was trying to give staff choices. Either way, I think we win.
Okay, second question.
You can narrow it to the one. If you do, then I would narrow it to the one of excluding all of Reston.
So if I do the half mile, there were some areas that were in our PRC, which would then anything built in those would become Reston Association members?
No, it has nothing to do with membership. In fact, these areas, I'm pretty sure none of them are zoned PRC. So that's not in the equation. This has nothing to do with covenanted land and who is members or not. That is a separate issue on all these zonings of non-covenanted land that we've been battling with the county. So,
This is stress on infrastructure issue.
pardon?
This is stresses on infrastructure
This
issue.
is unplanned residential growth issue. Basically, it's a bust to a planned community's comprehensive plan, which is supposed to be very specific about residential growth. Yes. Plain and simple.
We
That's
could ask to be excluded completely from any of the repurposing, or we could ask to be excluded just from the office to residential.
I would recommend just the office to residential because the other repurposing, quite frankly, is a sustainable practice, a green
make a
building
library.
practice, and seems to have a lot of good benefits. If you read the entire document, it's the office to residential that's the issue.
Yeah.
And again, in some areas of the county, it's needed to go to residential, and that's helpful, but not here.
So could you define when you say all of Reston, what that means?
All of Reston is boundaries of Reston, as we've done in all our One Reston presentations. In the 2014-2015 plan amendments, the boundaries of the old Reston master plan were coincided with a Reston chapter of the adopted comprehensive plan for Fairfax. The boundaries were jiggled to where they were the same. So when I say all of Reston, that's Town Center, and that's Reston Association. It's the entire boundary.
So,
but this just applies to TSAs and revitalization districts. So within Reston, the only areas that it's applicable to are the TSAs shown here and Lake Ann.
so what's the scenario? I don't know, I don't have a good example off the top of my head. Somewhere else in Reston, okay, not in the TSAs. If the property owner has an office building, let me preface this with, I expect there to be little or no affordable housing in the TSA areas, despite everything else that's said, okay? But if there's an office building elsewhere in Reston, not in the TSAs, that the property owner chose to repurpose to residential and could make it more affordable, would this preclude that, or how could they do that?
This would not preclude it. It does not encourage it or allow it. It's ambivalent towards that because that's outside of the applicability of this ordinance. What you'd have to look for there is, does that property in the Reston master plan allow or recommend residential uses in a mix or residential? If it doesn't, then you can replan it. And then you can get the housing. So maybe there are benefits there.
So that would be case-by-case basis?
Yes, absolutely. And if you do it, then you're going to adjust the infrastructure, at least study the infrastructure, and supposedly adjust it at the same time. See, this does it automatically without any study of infrastructure or anything.
That makes me shudder.
Me too.
Pardon?
I don't like the automatic.
Yeah, it's...
Okay.
Let me make a motion that we direct,
Getting a comment here, I signed up to comment on this. That's why I'm here tonight.
oh, okay.
Oh, I thought you already commented.
No.
No, this one, okay.
Yeah. Come on, John. Make him say his address again.
John Farrell, 11545 Under Oak Court. I rise in opposition to my brother's recommendation. Let me also begin by saying I'm somewhat furious at the idea that your council has told you that allowing all of the Reston Town Center to leave PRC would somehow unravel PRC. Baloney. There are so many acres in the PRC that you could let the whole town center go and the PRC would still be viable and effective. So don't be scared by that alternative. Just think about all the area that's PRC in Reston. And there's no proposal for the vast bulk of the PRC to be anything but what we see there today. I oppose this proposal to you because we have 20 million square feet of empty office space in the county. What are we going to do with all of that? This is a comprehensive plan recommendation. So remember what I said earlier about it's but a guide and not a suicide pact? So here's what happens. If this language gets in that's proposed for you to adopt, and someone says, hey, I've got this empty building, and I'd like to convert it into single-room occupancy, which we don't have much of, but we have a great need for. The staff report, first thing it'll say is, you're not allowed to convert in Reston in your rezoning. Sorry, can't do it. Absolutely precluded. And that will be the first line in the staff report from the county when they go to rezone for an SRO, as an example. To have that kind of absolute provision in it when the only thing worse for a residential cluster like mine to be next to a derelict office building that's empty, that's an attractive nuisance to a shooting gallery, or kids using it to get drunk, or homeless people breaking in, as happened at the Unitarian Church, on a regular basis. The only thing that's worse is to be next to a convenience center where the covenants aren't enforced. That's the problem with the proposal in front of you. And I have to say, one of the problems I have with the proposal that's in front of you for you to adopt is, gee whiz, this wasn't in the BOC package, and yet this proposal's been out there for quite some time. There are downsides to this proposal. You need to give this further consideration. Yes, the Planning Commission is considering next week, but it's not going to the Board of Supervisors for a while. You've got time. I'm happy to sit down with whomever and try and work through this issue. Don't rush to a decision tonight that is going to condemn residential clusters in Reston to be living next to an empty building indefinitely, and make it harder to take those empty office buildings, 20 million square feet of empty office buildings in the county, and many of them in Reston, and it says, well, just leave them there. Residential is the most viable use, but so what? That's a mistake. And again, we're talking about the comprehensive plan, not a rezoning, not a zoning ordinance. This fish ain't ready to fry, in the words of Pete Murphy. Mm-hmm. This needs more work. Please.
Okay.
Okay.
Madam President, I'd like John to comment further on this. So,
John?
It's John.
That's right. There are a lot of Johns. John Bowman is whom I was thinking of. Well, my understanding is that John Farrell, I understood you to say at one point that that the staff report from the county, if indeed we ask the county to exclude Reston from this text change in the policy ordinance, that the staff would have to write, this is not permitted in Reston. Indeed, it is simply not facilitated. Isn't that the case? It's not prohibited.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? I didn't understand the question.
Initially, I heard you say that if a Fairfax County staff person was writing a report on a building owner of a office building wanting to convert it to residential, that the first line of the Fairfax County staff report would say, this is not permitted in Reston. But indeed, it is not facilitated, as I understand, by this text ordinance. It is certainly not prohibited.
Yes.
How is it prohibited?
With the proposed amendment that you have in front of you.
Which one?
With the proposed amendment that is being recommended by council.
The one with the half mile?
What would be communicated is that if you're beyond the half mile, comprehensive plan says don't. Or if you use the other language they're talking about, if it's in Reston,
don't.
Can't do it.
Well, why
it would be contrary to the comprehensive plan. And with all respect, Mr. Mooney, my experience in Fairfax County, and Mr. Bob Zine can verify or dispute me as he sees fit. If you have a zoning application and the first line is, this is contrary to the comprehensive plan, go home. You're toast.
So I don't understand, John, why you're saying it's contrary to the comprehensive plan. There's always the ability to seek a rezoning or a replanning of the area.
Really?
So
let me just explain. Dave will help me out with this. Out-of-turn plan amendments for the last 3 years were excluded. You couldn't do it. So you had to wait, what was it, 3 years or 5 years the last cycle, Dave?
Oh, I think it's 3 years.
So you have to wait for 3 years to even ask for an out-of-turn plan amendment. So
even on a project basis?
Yes, sir. That's what an out-of-turn plan amendment is. An out-of-turn plan amendment in Fairfax County is, I have a specific piece of property, and I want you the county to replan my specific piece of property. So that neighborhood sits there waiting for their turn in the plan cycle, unless the Board of Supervisor from that district says, okay, I want an out-of-turn plan amendment. So you're sitting there and people are breaking into the building and kids are having beer parties in the back while you're waiting for your turn in the 3-year cycle. You're asking for a lot.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question.
I'd like to hear John McBride.
Yeah, let me summarize again and hopefully try to clarify. Again, countywide, there are a lot of office buildings empty. This serves a very useful purpose. We're talking about in Reston. In Reston, this proposal only applies to the TSA areas and Lake Ann. It does not apply to any other office buildings outside of these areas. So what's our concern? What we're concerned about is not repurposing office buildings. You can repurpose them to a large number of things. We're not proposing that that be changed in the county's proposal. All we are proposing is the office to residential not be applicable in the Reston Master Plan area, which is the area you see up here, and Lake Ann.
When you say
And yes,
Lake Ann-
that would constrain some buildings in there from automatically being deemed appropriate for residential use in the comp plan. If they are, then you have the potential for unplanned growth because your comprehensive plan is not going to have dealt with those units. Could be thousands. We have 5.8 million square feet of office within that area. So that's the concern. It's a very limited exclusion. It's not an exclusion of the entire amendment and policy. It's only office to residential. And the reason is shown right there on that map. Those areas that are planned for only office use. If you think that those areas should be expanded to be residential or multi-use, then I would agree with Mr. Farrell, then you would agree with Mr. Farrell. If you think that question should go through a specific plan amendment community engagement process for those particular areas, that is what staff and I are trying to set up. I mean, it's your choice. It's the community's choice. I'm just pointing out the problems with this. The whole discussion about PRC and the fixes we want in the comprehensive plan relate to unplanned residential growth, areas where the comp plan says a minimum of 1,000 units. Well, that's really not very helpful in determining how to balance your infrastructure to units because you don't have a maximum. You don't know what you're balancing to. It's the same way. That was the concern.
Can you just define Lake Ann for me? You keep saying and Lake Ann, so what?
Lake Ann Village Center is a
Village Center itself.
revitalization district.
Right.
I think it covers most of the center. I don't think it covers the
But it
entire
doesn't
center,
go-
but the
it's
majority
not-
of it.
It doesn't go beyond that
No, not at all.
area.
And
No.
how many of the buildings in Lake Ann Village Center would qualify under the definition of office?
Not very many.
The one
There's 2 or 3.
circling the village center?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3. But again, that one's not likely to happen, but even if it does, that one's really not of a big concern because it's already planned for a significant amount of additional residential. It's already been zoned to allow it too, so.
Madam President, if I may just say this, the reason why I'm attracted with the recommendation, one or other of Mr. McBride's proposals, is that in the in-depth conversations that Larry Butler and I had with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation people, we pressed them on this balance of residential and office. And if you don't have the proper balance, it causes an immense problem with traffic. And they said, well, we're going to balance it. And I said, well, how are you going to balance it? And they said, well, we keep track.
That's comforting.
Project by project. So
No cars allowed, only can take Metro?
This is why I was initially attracted to one or other of Mr. McBride's proposals, and I'm still not persuaded that it might be in our best interest. I hear John Farrell's points, but I'm concerned about that balance. And in traffic, in the generation of traffic, you want offsetting office in urbanized areas. You want offsetting residential and office. You don't want all of one or the other.
I'd be curious to hear what David might have to say on this.
Well, I'm kind of torn because I understand John Farrell's position on this, and when he talks about single residency occupancy, SROs, there's a crying need for that in the county.
Yes.
Of course, it might inflame a lot of people that I don't want an SRO next to me, but I think that is a lacking housing choice in Reston and the county. So I'm really torn on this one, but for the purpose of going forward and at least getting it on the table, I'm going to make a motion that we direct RA staff to work with county staff to exclude Reston from the proposed building repurposing comprehensive plan amendment as it applies to the conversion of office to residential.
I'll second that, at least for purposes of discussion.
Any discussion? I feel like we discussed.
I have a comment. I'm sympathetic to Mr. Farrell's concern, but I'm more concerned with unplanned growth impact on the infrastructure.
Let me just clarify to make sure that there is the live-work component, and that is still applicable. So that's not excluded. That's not counted as residential.
Okay.
So would SROs fit under that category?
Nope. I don't think so. I don't know that.
There's no guarantee it would be an SRO.
Right.
I mean, you can't mandate that. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Any more discussion? We can call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? No abstentions. It's all ayes.
Okay. All right. Reston Town Center North.
Reston Town Center North, and it's almost 10 o'clock.
I talk faster than John McBride.
Okay.
This is not hard.
All right, you've heard me in the past, at the last land use update, gave you a real high-level overview of the Reston Town Center North rezoning application that's been filed. I want to go into just a little bit more detail and kind of bring to light some of the aspects of that we have commented on. Nuts and bolts of the application that is in with the county right now. And this is an application with Fairfax County, Board of Supervisors, and Inova for the Reston Town Center North, approximately 47 acres that most of you are quite familiar with. So it's really to establish the grid of streets and the development blocks that will be developed over time, as individual development blocks. And this really focuses on the overall layout. It is under the Reston Association covenants, and so that's an important piece. So anything that happens there will go before the Reston Design Review Board, and they are scheduled, I think, to come in January to the DRB, bringing this rezoning application, even though there's no architecture involved with it at this point. And the project will generate approximately 3 million gross square feet. So that's a very, very large project. So I'm going into a little bit of details. This is the overall development layout. You can see the central green. I'm going to talk much more specifically about that. And for those of you familiar with this, Block 9, those are the workforce housing that are there right now. So The block just to the right of that is where the police station is, and kind of get your bearings. On the north is Baron Cameron Avenue. So we recently submitted our initial round of comments. We did get feedback from a couple of committees, and this is just kind of shows you how the memo is generated. Probably you've seen this. I believe it's included in your packets as well. Importantly, back in 2016, Fairfax County and this board and the association entered into a memorandum of understanding with respect to the old open space covenant that basically had 10 acres of protected open space. And through this MOU, there was agreement with the county that they will endeavor, and I'm going to use that word, endeavor, to protect 10 acres of open space in the future redevelopment of this. This memorandum is also in your packet for those of you who want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But I just want to highlight it here because there's definitions of what constitutes open space in that memo. And so what I'm going to talk about here is sort of what we generally think of as of Reston open space, which may be a little bit different from an urban development type of open space. So the first part of the comment document has to do with environmental stewardship, obviously a very important thing in Reston. And one of the things that we noted is, and it's mentioned many times in the comprehensive plan, is preserving naturally occurring or existing woodlands. And this overlay here in the green there shows the existing natural open space in the Town Center North District. And the parcel to kind of the middle on the right, that kind of large mass of green area, that was the former Park Authority site. The Park Authority deeded over, essentially gave to the Board of Supervisors to commence this redevelopment in exchange for approximately 90,000 square feet of indoor recreation space in the future somewhere in Reston Town Center North. So that's a pretty substantial piece of natural area there. So we've also asked for commitments regarding this natural open space, to protect as much as possible. And again, a lot of that we won't see come to fruition until the individual development blocks are processed over time. So we'll be watching that very, very closely. And this is a long-term process. However, we do have, I will say, concerns about the ability to protect some of these natural areas as this development moves forward. Then at the very bottom there, that is actually taken right from the MOU, the parties' mutual understanding that the redevelopment of RTCN will provide a minimum of 10 acres of open space. Again, the definitions of open space you can find in there. And it does include urban plaza, hardscape, as well as natural areas and recreational open space. In the plan set that was submitted, there are these two different charts of development potential. And I want to bring those to your attention. The first one, as you just kind of go through the plan set, the first one that comes up is the one on the top there. And as highlighted here, the number of units there exceeds the allowable DUAs in the current PRC zoning ordinance. The one at the bottom is consistent with the 50 dwelling units per acre max in the existing PRC zoning ordinance. So we've asked for a clarification of which one is it. Is the top one that, put into the documents in anticipation of a change to the ordinance, which would permit that higher number, or is it the lower number, which is consistent with the current PRC zoning ordinance? So that's a clarification we've asked for. From an accessibility standpoint, and the Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee provided comments on this, there are bike lanes and bike accommodations in the plan, and these blue lines highlight where the existing bike infrastructure, future bike infrastructure is slated. You'll notice the two main east-west streets as proposed in the grid of streets don't include that, and so what we're recommending is that in a high-density area like this, there should be bicycle accommodations on all those streets. And so that is a specific recommendation that we have made and will continue to push. Then this is from the comprehensive plan, and it looks very similar to one of the charts that John had up earlier. And you'll notice, and I can't use the pointer, but the little green dot in the legend there is a major open space amenity. And so there's a major open space amenity recommended as part of the redevelopment of Reston Town Center North, straight from the comprehensive plan. I think you can get 10 people around a table, and those 10 people may agree or may not agree on what constitutes a major open space amenity. So I want to talk a little bit more specifically about that. So again, this is the generalized layout from the documents that were submitted. And so I just want to zoom in on those a little bit. So the north end of this is planting areas, hardscape, sort of urban plaza sorts of things. This is the largest piece of green space in the plan. And for comparison's sake, we did a little scaling off of this from the plan set as best we could. So it's kind of just large scale. Taking a look at that. I'm going to get to that in a second. This is the, again, the lower portion there. Again, you can see it's crisscrossed with hardscape, sidewalks, and so forth. You know, certainly looks to be what would be active, you know, kind of urban hardscape. But from a major recreational amenity or open space amenity, that's not what we really consider that. And then this is the very bottom portion, which, you know, again, when I look at this, I think, hey, there's a lot of hardscape there. So for comparison's sake, that largest piece of green space, we superimposed a tennis court on that. That is a single tennis court. One tennis court. So in our estimation, this is not what was contemplated by the Reston community as a central green. When people think of a central green, now this is much larger scale, you know, you kind of think of, you know, a mini Washington Mall, you know, where you can actually play some field games, maybe throw a Frisbee or something. We don't think this cuts it. And so I think this is an important thing. I want to thank Kelsey for putting together this cool presentation too. And that is it. So I just want to, you know, highlight those items. These are things we're going to be responding to, commenting on, and hopefully get a little community action on these same activities, kind of what you were talking about earlier, Sharon. You know, the more people that have knowledge of what is really contemplated there, and the more people that speak out about it, I think is important. And you've heard me say this before, but I think it's worth reiterating that at 3 million gross square feet of proposed development, by the county's own metrics, at 2.2 million square feet, that constitutes a full-service athletic field. And, you know, that's nowhere to be found here. And so I think this is something we just need to keep pressing. And it's a little upsetting that Fairfax County, by its own metrics, is going forward with a very large redevelopment in concert with Inova, and apparently there's no contemplation of even getting close to that in what they have submitted thus far.
Yeah, so this, if I may, so this was the case like a year or year and a half back. Looks like they've made no changes at all, right, except for that small sliver of the central.
Yeah, the central green is much more compact than we initially contemplated.
Okay, the second question I had was, last year I thought they hadn't, the county had not yet confirmed that they would affirm Reston, the deeding of 10 acres to Reston Association. Is that confirmed now, or have they agreed to that?
Not the deeding of, but protecting 10 acres of open space.
Okay. Okay, so they haven't confirmed. That's still not confirmed. Okay. You know, in 1974 it was deeded, or at least it was supposed to be deeded to Reston.
Yeah, John, I'll let John address that.
No?
That's not true. It was never deeded to Reston. There was a deed covenant.
Yeah. Covenant, okay, yeah.
Restricting its use for landscape and natural areas. So what we did is our agreement with the county was that there will be 10 acres of open space, and we had a definition that we put into that agreement. This does not necessarily show all the 10 acres. We were hoping it would all be in the central green, but they and Inova are the property owners, so they get a say of where it is. But that agreement will still be enforced, so as the individual blocks come in, there will have to be at least 10 acres. We were hoping to get as much contiguous green area as possible. We still hope to do that. That's our comments. We're still pressing on that. We've had discussions with the applicant about that very fact and the county, and I think the community needs to become engaged and have those same discussions, just like they did on the PRC ordinance. It's got to be more than one voice, and it's very important. Not only should the county follow its own guidelines and its own adopted plan, it's our plan, it's the Reston Master Plan, and the county should follow it in partnership with us.
So, John,
Yes.
as you've taught us well, the PRC zoning ordinance requires that any development plan within the PRC must conform with the comprehensive plan as to uses, density, and intensity, and so forth.
Yes.
Does this requirement of a active playing field for any property with more than 2.2 million square
Yes.
feet fit that requirement?
Yeah, we think it does. We think it
So in
fits
other
under
words,
Article
that has
16.
the
It's
force-
more than
that has
just a
the
guide.
force of ordinance.
Well, that's our position.
Okay.
Sue has been wanting to make a comment.
Hi, I'm Sue Bethel, 1511 Forster Court, Reston, Virginia. I would like to, first of all, thank you all for what you did in the previous session regarding the density issues, and thank all those 900 people who showed up and all the other people who watched at home. Meanwhile, on this one, in the Environmental Advisory Committee, we did vote and actually send in our comments to Larry on this topic. And one of our comments in this direction was that the entire layout, if you go back to the first slide on this one.
You can use that one.
Okay, or even the first one where it's bigger. There we go. Okay, if you look at the way these are put in, where the trees are now, you can see at least in the green pieces there. What they're going to do is take out virtually all the existing trees if they have to follow this layout. We'd rather have them take a different layout entirely. This is, I know it's radical, but they're still discussing at this point. Perhaps one that goes horizontal or in an angle so that where they're going to have a park, use the existing trees as part of that park rather than tearing everything down and then creating a little pencil thing in the middle. My 2 cents.
Thanks, Sue.
This is just for information. No motion.
No motions.
This is just, yep.
Okay.
Done.
Well, thanks for the great news, Larry.
Right.
So are we asked to make a motion on this?
No.
matter?
No, that's informational.
Information.
Okay, so, Kate, over to you.
J.
We are on easement right-of-way access.
To keep it short and sweet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You have, you've probably seen over the past several meetings that you have had this year that you're getting lots of easement requests. In fact, you'll be taking up one later this evening. It is time for the association to put a policy in place so that there are clear guidelines not only from those who are asking for non-residential easements across our property, but also for staff to follow as well. So that is what this particular resolution does. It is new, Common Area Rules and Regulations Resolution 15, easements and right-of-way access.
Okay, so there's a motion in our packet to adopt the proposed Common Area Rules and Regulations Resolution 15, easement and right-of-way access.
May I ask a question first?
No. And if somebody seconds, and then we can talk about it.
I second.
Okay, second.
Okay, Nathan.
Okay.
So
Victoria.
Victoria moved and Sridhar seconded.
So 2 questions, Kate. Should section 2A, which deals with restoration, include the possible requirement to remove changes made to the easement area by the lessee.
Bear with me a moment.
So it,
John, where are you talking?
so
2A, page 2.
yeah, so we talk about, you know, if they abandon the easement, and they have built something there, unless we want the improvement, quotes, that they put there, should we be able to require its?
John, you had the, I think, if I recall, you had the same concern over the
I did.
the easement, the pipeline?
Right.
Yeah.
And the second point is, there are, and perhaps this is deliberate at this point, but there are no guidelines that I was able to see for how we would determine the value of the easement. We have a fee structure for applying for the easement, but we don't discuss guidelines for assessing what the value of the easement is to us, so far as I can see. Is that to be done later, or?
Well, it's really done on a site-specific basis. To answer your first concern, again, this is an overall policy and structure. So when an application comes in, we apply this policy and structure, and on a case-by-case basis, you may want to insist, this board might want to insist upon the improvements being removed if it's abandoned. They might want them to stay if it's abandoned.
Exactly.
So it's really not something to put in an overall policy, because you can't predict all outcomes. So I assure you, it does not preclude that or discourage that at all. Same with, we wrestled with the part of compensation, and compensation can differ greatly depending upon what's being put in there, the use, the timing of the use, the extent of their disturbance of the area. So really, that's something that, again, is site-specific also. So that's really the reason for that. I don't think you want to lock into a certain amount, because then it's hard to deviate from that amount once you put that in that public policy.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for a certain amount, but a procedure, even just, I
think the procedure follows similar to any market valuation principles that appraisers use, that the county uses in eminent domain, and that assessors use. And that's pretty well understood by applicants.
Okay, so Kate, I gave you the wrong site. It's 2C, not 2A.
Yes, I just noticed that.
So, and I'm not saying that we require removal of improvements, but simply that we note in 2C that we might do that. I don't know. Again, this seems to be a particular concern of mine. That's not a concern to others. But
no, so Section C states, site-specific restoration requirements by the applicant are mandatory and may entail the planting of native plants, trees, and grasses, as well as warranty guarantees on the restoration of the work site.
Yeah, that's restoration after the work is completed. That's a different issue than you're addressing, John. So you would need to add a different category or sentence.
it's just that, and we can always require it, but it would be nice for our policy to say we can require it, was my thought. But
Would it be
the removal, that is, of
But that could be
improvements.
something also that would be taken care of in the individual easement.
Absolutely, but it's nice to have a tickler in our policy.
Would it be just acceptable to add site-specific restoration or removal?
Well, that's talking about upon abandonment.
But isn't that what it says, that we're requiring them to restore?
That's after installation of whatever they're putting into the easement area.
So I'm talking then, I guess, about a completely new item about
Yes.
abandonment.
I think so, and quite frankly, what we had told you before, I think is still true, in that once this policy gets published and we continue to work with it and use it, we'll be back in about a year, I'm sure, with fine-tuning based on our experience. So I don't, quite frankly, I'm okay with adding it, but I'm also okay with the fact that you're covered, Mr. Mooney, and that we can add it later. It's not like your issue will be avoided or ignored.
Okay, but if our policy doesn't remind us to do that, will we remember? That's
Well,
my
I'm sure
concern.
you will.
Wow.
Just want to go on record with
That's
that.
a good one. Any more discussion on this motion? You ready for a vote?
Can it be reread since I had to do a bio break?
I'm sorry, Julie, I cannot hear you.
I had to go out for a bio break. Can you just?
Can you just read the motion?
Yeah. Has it changed from what's in the package?
No, ma'am.
Well, never mind.
So, call for a vote. All those in favor of passing the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That wasn't opposition. I went along with the gang.
You'll be here in a year to make.
Well,
changes.
we'll see if I survive.
Kate, that was unanimous. Okay, the next thing, executive session.
Cup of tea.
So this is we move it to executive session for the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I move that the Reston Association Board of Directors reconvene in executive session.
A second?
Well, you need to state the purpose.
To consult with legal counsel on board operations matter, member records request, and Tall Oaks redevelopment project easement request.
Madam President, with respect, there's also a litigation matter that needs to be discussed in executive session.
In addition, a litigation matter that needs to be discussed.
Okay, that's a motion.
Question, I apologize. We had intended, and it is up to your discretion, to give an overview of the Tall Oaks matter at a high level before executive session.
Sure.
It is entirely up
That's
to
fine.
you
Yeah.
before you adjourn into
Yeah.
it.
That's fine, everybody stay. I withdraw the motion.
Withdraw the motion.
Just say yes.
Sure, your face is awesome right now. You're like,
It's her favorite thing, right?
Okay.
Sure.
Go, Larry.
Okay, got it.
So I've been before you before, as Noah Klein from Feldman here. We were approached by the developers of the Tall Oaks Village Center site. They've requested of the association a approximately 1,700 square foot no-build easement at the rear of the future condominium buildings, and it's on a parcel of RA common area. It's a wooded parcel between the Village Center and Wheelie Avenue. And they have requested this to essentially because of fire codes with the building code and the proximity of their buildings to our property line. And so they need this small sliver of easement to be able to develop those buildings in the way that they have initially set out to do so. There are two representatives here from the development company, so if you'll have specific questions about those items, I'm sure they'd be happy to entertain those questions. And Noah and I have been working on this as well. And I think most of what we'll discuss will be in executive session. But if you have questions generally about the easement with the parcel, we're happy to answer those.
One quick question. Will granting the easement require or permit the removal of trees?
No.
Okay.
It is a building restriction on the common area.
Okay. Because it looked like it was a wooded area.
It is a wooded area, right?
And kind of further to that, is the structure being proposed to be built so close that trees would have to be taken out regardless of the easement?
No.
RA trees?
No.
No, okay.
No. So this is basically the easement is for the association, basically stating we are not going to build in that 1,700 approximately square feet of common area in our property. So there's no groundwork or earthwork associated with it. It's just simply, it's a restriction on building on that piece of common area.
Okay, now?
All right. Madam President, I move that the Reston Association Board of Directors convene in executive session to consult with legal counsel on a board operations matter, member records request, Tall Oaks redevelopment project easement request, and certain litigation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're moving into an executive session. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Sweet dreams.
Cup of tea.
All right.
Bike's off.